Chapter 641. After coming out of the Empress Dowager's mansion, Xiao Wanru was led to Chu Liuchen's Prince Chen's mansion. She entered through the side door of the Imperial Palace. After entering, she was led to Chu Liuchen's courtyard by the servants of Prince Chen's mansion. After entering the room, Xiao Xuanzi stepped forward and saluted, "Fifth Miss. How is Prince Chen?" Xiao Wanru frowned slightly and asked softly, "Go and have a look." Xiao Xuanzi shrugged his head and said. He moved a brocade stool to the bed for Xiao Wanru and then stepped aside. Xiao Wanru walked over and sat down on the brocade stool. She bit her lip silently and looked at Chu Liuchen, who was lying in the quilt. His face was as pale as ever, as if there was no trace of blood. His lips were pale, and he was lying on the bed as if he was not breathing, which made her feel suffocated. Xiao Xuanzi left silently and closed the door of the inner room for them. Xiao Wanru reached out her hand and hesitated for a moment. But she still put her hand under his nose to feel his breath. It was very faint, but it was indeed there. She put her hand down. This time, she reached into the quilt and gently pulled his hand out. She put her hand on his pulse and closed her eyes to feel his pulse carefully. His pulse was actually not very weak. At least, Xiao Wanru felt that it was much stronger than his breathing. She inexplicably felt relieved. She knew that he would not have an accident like that. A scourge would live for thousands of years. How could a scourge like him die so early? Now that she thought of what had happened, it seemed to be right in front of her, so it seemed that all of this had been planned long ago. In this case, it was even more impossible for Chu Liuchen to have an accident. "Are you worried about me?" Chu Liuchen's voice came into her ears. Xiao Wanru suddenly opened her eyes and looked at Chu Liuchen on the bed. She didn't know when he had opened his handsome eyes. He looked at Xiao Wanru with a smile. He looked a little lazy as usual, but his face was too pale. You are really fine." Xiao Wanru bit her lip and said after a long while. "How could I be fine? I spat out a mouthful of poisonous blood, so I am naturally not fine." Chu Liuchen said lightly. "Poisonous blood? You were poisoned?" Xiao Wanru understood the meaning of Chu Liuchen's words and couldn't help narrowing her eyes. "I was poisoned early. The so-called fetal poison can also be poisoned." Chu Liuchen held Xiao Wanru's hand and said softly. Xiao Wanru's hand involuntarily trembled. Everyone knew that Chu Liuchen was born with fetal poison. The so-called fetal poison might be caused by the late emperor's diet or other aspects when he didn't pay attention to it. It turned out that it was not fetal poison but poisoning. But Xiao Wanru was not surprised at this point. She had felt Chu Liuchen's pulse several times and always felt that this kind of symptom was indeed similar to poisoning, but this kind of poison was not very obvious. She had never seen fetal poison before, so she thought that this might be fetal poison. Since it was called poison, this fetal poison might also have the general symptoms of poisoning. Only now did he realize that the so-called fetal poison was just a cover-up. In fact, he was really poisoned. Yan Chudong said, and then she said, "Yen said Yan's yen. And you said Chu Chio yen." Yen Chu and said, "Yan's yen." Not and said, "Dowager you. Don't be afraid. I will protect you. I can protect my people." Chu Liuchen said with a smile. Xiao Wanru thought of the scene in Huaguang Temple and couldn't help asking, "What's the meaning of saving my life?" With this life-saving grace, Imperial grandmother will think highly of you. No matter how partial your grandmother is, it doesn't matter as long as Imperial grandmother likes you. Chu Liuchen said with a smile and sparkling eyes. Even at this time, his hoarse voice made people feel that the person in front of him was as gentle as jade. Xiao Wanru pursed her lips and wanted to say something, but she didn't know what to say at the moment. She felt a little flustered and turned her head to avoid his burning eyes subconsciously. There was an uncontrollable feeling in her heart. She couldn't tell what it meant. She just felt that she didn't know what to say in the current situation. She was in a mess. Her long eyelashes fluttered twice, and she had a strange feeling in her heart, which made her unable to say what she had prepared. "Thank you, Your Highness." She bit her lip again, suppressed the palpitation in her heart, and thanked him. "It was just a matter of convenience. But you are also my future princess. If someone bullies you, it will make me lose face. Chu Luchen said with a smile in his charming eyes. He reached out to hold her hand and closed his eyes slightly. This time, it was a fake show, but also a real one. He killed several birds with one stone and eliminated his stubborn illness for many years with this excuse. If it continued to be delayed like this, his body really couldn't hold on any longer. Now the time was just right. Is there really someone, or are those men in black here? Xiao Wanru hesitated for a moment and asked. He's not this king's man. Although Xiao Wanru was hesitant, Chu Luchen knew what she was asking. Of course, he had contributed a lot to it. Otherwise, he wouldn't have seized this opportunity so coincidentally. Who is it? Xiao Wanru asked. No matter who it is, it's okay. Chu Liuchen's words became more and more casual. He raised his thin lips and smiled sweetly with some elegance. Even when he was ill, he still looked extremely elegant and handsome. When Xiao Wanru said it, she knew that she had said something wrong. How could she inquire about this kind of thing? Fortunately, Chu Luchen didn't say anything, so she didn't feel so ashamed. Your Highness, do you need me to do anything? She suppressed the uncertainty in her heart and slowly regained her clarity in her watery eyes. I don't need you to do anything. You can go back in a while. Since I'm in a coma, I naturally won't keep you. Chu Luchen smiled slightly, but still held Xiao Wanru's hand in his hand and didn't intend to let go. Then take good care of your illness, Your Highness. Xiao Wanru withdrew her hand, but her hand was held tightly, so she didn't dare to use too much force. Chu Luchen was probably not acting at the moment. She had felt his pulse just now. Of course I have to take good care of my illness, but it's still early for you to go back. Stay with me and have a rest. Chu Luchen said and pulled Xiao Wanru so hard that she involuntarily fell to the bed and almost fell straight on him. Seeing the pale handsome face in front of her, Xiao Wanru was so scared that she reached out to the edge of the bed and finally stabilized her body. When she stabilized her body, she couldn't help feeling ashamed and annoyed. Your Highness. Just for a while. Don't worry. I'm tired now and really have no energy. Chu Luchen naturally pulled her sleeve and pulled her to the front of him. Xiao Wanru was pulled by him in an extremely stiff posture and half of her body lay on the bed. If it weren't for the fact that Chu Luchen was so weak that he could hardly move, she would have struggled hard. But now she didn't dare to, for fear that she would hurt him again if she moved. Your Highness, go to sleep first. I won't leave now. Xiao Wanru pushed his hand away and said helplessly. Her words were extremely natural, and when she finished speaking, her face flushed. Wait for an hour. Imperial grandmother won't like it if you leave too early. Chu Luchen took the medicine and really couldn't hold on at this time. He closed his eyes slightly and relaxed his hand a little, so that Xiao Wanru could sit at the head of the bed. Your Highness, don't worry. I'll wait for an hour before leaving. Xiao Wanru sighed helplessly and leaned against the head of the bed. She also knew that it was the right time to leave. If it was too early, the Empress Dowager would be a little unhappy and think that she was a little too late. The good situation that she had created for her before might be gone. It became quiet in the room, and only Chu Liuchen's light breathing could be heard. This time, his breathing was right beside her ears, but it was not as faint and almost silent as when she entered the door just now. She relaxed and turned her watery eyes to Chu Luchen. His handsome and elegant face was really like that of a banished immortal from heaven. Moreover, he was an indifferent banished immortal, but one could see the coldness in his character from his thin, light-colored lips. Xiao Wanru had always known that Chu Luchen was indifferent and ruthless. It could be said that since she was reborn, she had clearly known that although her memory of the last life was messy, the scene of those beauties dying there clearly appeared in her memory. It was all because of Chu Luchen. So many beautiful faces died ferociously and twisted under the sky. Even the sky was blood red. How could such a Chu Luchen be a good person? Even though he had always looked harmless in front of others, like a noble and beautiful young man walking out of an ink painting. But this did not prevent Xiao Wanru from knowing Chu Liuchen's ferocity. At the moment, this ferocious and beautiful young man was sleeping quietly beside her. His long eyelashes were slightly curled and fell on his pale eyes, which made people feel that he was extraordinarily handsome. Because of his pale face, he even looked weak at this time, although he had never shown such a weak feeling in the past. If she counted the age of her 2 lives, Xiao Wanru felt that she was actually a little older than him. Thinking of what he had done for her just now, she reached out to pull a strand of his hair aside and felt a little soft and warm in her heart. In her 2 lives, no one had ever taken the initiative to take care of her. He actually did so much for her and could still consider her at the moment of life and death. She clenched her hands hard, and her fingertips pricked her palm, which made the bottom of her eyes clearer. She took a long breath and suppressed a trace of other thoughts in her heart at this moment. Her watery eyes became clear. She reached out to tuck a corner of the quilt for Chu Luqian, and then turned her head to look at his handsome face quietly. After leaving Prince Chen's mansion an hour later, Xiao Xuanzi came in to invite her. Xiao Wanru carefully pulled her hand out from Chu Liuqian's hand and then left quietly. After she pulled her hand out and left quietly, Chu Luqian opened his eyes slightly and reached out to rub the space between his eyebrows. His eyes, which had always been clear, were a little confused. He looked at the slightly closed door with a rare hesitant look. When the door opened, Xiao Xuanzi walked in quietly. Seeing Chu Liuqian's slightly open eyes, he took 2 steps forward and said in a low voice, "Master, what should we do with those people who led the assassins here?" Although his master deliberately set up this line, it was certain that these people were unreliable. "Kill them without mercy." The cold voice was with a treacherous hostility. The handsome young master, who had been gentle just now, immediately became as bloodthirsty as a ghost. Chapter 642. When she stepped into Duke Xing's mansion again, the door of the mansion was wide open. Seeing Xiao Wanru's carriage coming, all the servants hurriedly stepped forward to salute her. They were even more respectful than in great elder princess's mansion. It made people feel that everyone was currying favor with the 5th Miss Xiao in front of them. After being welcomed into the mansion, she first went to visit Old Madam. This time, Old Madam finally didn't see her in a sickly state. Although her expression was a little indifferent, she could still squeeze out some kind expression on her face and asked about everything in Huaguang Temple. The most important thing was that she asked about the assassination of Chu Luqian. Now it was widely said that Xiao Wanru had saved Chu Liuqian's life. Although Chu Liuqian's life had always been precarious, his life had always been extremely precious. Xiao Wanru saved his life, which was equivalent to saving face in front of the Empress Dowager. Even if Old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion was secretly angry, she could do nothing about it. She could not give face to Xiao Wanru, but she had to give face to the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager had just sent a reward over and praised Xiao Wanru repeatedly. She also sent someone to tell Old Madam of Duke Xing that it would be 3 years of mourning. She could stay in the mansion for the next period of time. There was not much time left. Although it was said that mourning in Huaguang Temple was more filial, most people would mourn in their own homes. Xiao Wanru had done a good job. She had been mourning in the Buddha's lamp for such a long time, which was the first in the capital city. Since the Empress Dowager had said so, Old Madam did not dare to disobey. Fortunately, the courtyard had been prepared before, and it was also managed by Xiao Wanru's supervisor old maid, so it was okay for her to live in it now. "Grandma, I don't know much about Prince Jin. I happened to meet him at that time, so I didn't think too much about it, so I just blocked him. Fortunately, His Highness is fine." Xiao Wanru said honestly. "Did you find out who he was?" Madame of Duke Xing said with a gentle face and obvious concern. "I didn't find out. It was very chaotic at that time, and it happened suddenly. I accidentally ran into it." Xiao Wanru shook her head and frowned slightly. "You can't find out anything at all. Can't you find out?" Madame of Duke Xing asked again. Xiao Wanru shook her head. "Go down and have a good rest first. You don't have to go to Huaguang Temple next. Because of what happened to Prince Qin, Huaguang Temple has to be investigated again. You won't be quiet if you stay there. Just stay at home and observe mourning." Seeing that she couldn't get any information, Old Madam's expression became cold. Xiao Wanru had expected such a result. She stood up respectfully, bowed and turned to leave. However, she stopped when she reached the door. There were some gifts on the table by the window at the door, including some beautiful satin and embroidery patterns on other gorgeous brocade boxes. With one look, she knew it was not an ordinary thing. She narrowed her eyes and walked out of the door calmly as if she did not see the pile of gifts. Those were the rewards from the palace. Outside the door, Yujie came up and looked angry. Fortunately, she could bear it. Seeing Xiao Wanru's calm face, she took a deep breath and suppressed her anger just now. Since Miss could bear it, why couldn't she, as a servant girl, bear it? She glared at an arrogant servant girl beside her and followed Xiao Wanru. The master and servant left old madam's courtyard one after another and returned to their own courtyard. At the gate of the courtyard, Nanny Yu had been waiting there for a long time. When she saw Xiao Wanru coming, she immediately came up to greet her. "Have you arranged everything?" Xiao Wanru asked as she walked inside. "Everything has been arranged. Great Elder Princess brought a few people here to help clean up." After Great Elder Princess's people went back, Madam of Duke Xing asked someone to send some people here. "I picked some second-class and third-class servant girls and old maids," Nanny Yu said as she welcomed Xiao Wanru inside. And Great Elder Princess was Xiao Wanru's maternal grandmother, so she could not intervene in the affairs of Duke Xing's mansion. She just asked someone to help Nanny Yu clean up the courtyard and then went back. Duke Xing's mansion sent many people here. Nanny Yu picked some who looked good and placed them in the courtyard. As for the number of principal maids, Xiao Wanru already had Yu Jie, Chu Lu, and Qin Yu, so she had 3. Although the first miss of an aristocratic family usually had 4 principal maids by her side, there were usually only 2 or 3. Only when she got married would she have enough principal maids. Xiao Wanru now had 3, which was quite a lot. Even Xiao Yenru, the first miss of Duke Xing's mansion, didn't seem to have enough. The nanny in charge was Nanny Yu. As an etiquette instructor, Nanny Zheng also entered the Piaoyun courtyard where Xiao Wanru lived now. When Nanny Zheng came, she came with Ri and Great Elder Princess's people. Because they were Ri and Great Elder Princess's people and they said that they would leave after helping, Duke Xing's mansion did not make things difficult for them and let them enter Duke Xing's mansion. After that, when the people of Ri and Great Elder Princess's mansion left, no one paid attention to Nanny Zheng, who stayed alone. Nanny Zheng, who stayed in the Piaoyun courtyard, temporarily served as Nanny Yu's assistant and helped Nanny Yu deal with affairs. Although Nanny Yu was loyal, there were many things she could not do well because of her vision. With Nanny Zheng's help, Xiao Wanru could better arrange the whole courtyard. Fortunately, with Nanny Zheng's help, the whole courtyard was much more orderly, and Xiao Wanru could live in it after returning to the mansion in advance. However, there were still some things that were not satisfactory. After all, the master of Duke Xing's mansion was Madam of Duke Xing. As a servant from outside, it was very inconvenient for Nanny Yu to ask for things from the powerful Madam of Duke Xing. Qin Yu also came with Nanny Zheng. Hearing that Xiao Wanru had come back, a group of trusted subordinates greeted Xiao Wanru in the room and then talked about what had happened in Duke Xing's mansion during this period of time. The first was Nanny Yu. "Miss, when I first came here, although this courtyard could be lived in and had a complete set of things, many things were not good. Not to mention the things in Great Elder Princess's mansion, they were not even as good as those in Qin's mansion before. They looked very bright on the surface, but in fact, they were nothing. They just looked good." Nanny Yu said angrily. During the period when she came to Duke Xing's mansion, she got everything she wanted, but no one refused her bluntly. When she asked for things, they refused one after another. Often, after being busy for a whole day, she could not find anyone who could make the decision. "Miss, I'm the same. Every time our Piaoyun courtyard needs something, they refuse to give it to us, as if no one is willing to get involved in our Piaoyun courtyard. Every small thing can make them wrangle and fail to do anything. Even in the end, it's our Piaoyun courtyard that makes mistakes." Qin Yu, who had always been good-tempered, also said angrily. Fortunately, Miss had not lived in Duke Xing's mansion in the past 3 years. Otherwise, Miss would have been tortured to death by these things. Moreover, Miss was still young at that time. Even if she had something to say, it was not convenient for her to say it. In the whole Duke Xing's mansion, Miss had no one to rely on. "Miss, when I was standing outside the door just now, The principal maid of old madam talked to me as if she was giving me charity and asked me to take this and that. Thinking that Miss would come to the mansion, I endured it. Yujie thought of what had happened just now and said angrily. She had just arrived at Duke Xing's mansion today. Even if there was something, Yujie could only endure it. Otherwise, how would others think of her miss? Yes, I came back first. I asked a few old maids and maids I met on the way why I came to the Piaoyun courtyard. They all seemed to treat me as if I was poisoned. Some even answered me, some hurriedly avoided me, and some even spat at me. Chu Lu also said angrily. She came back first with Qing, after entering the door just now. Along the way, she also suffered a lot of anger. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly, and there was a trace of deepness in her watery eyes. She had thought that the whole Duke Xing's mansion did not like her. However, she was not the same as she was 3 years ago. Although she had no right to speak after she was over 14 years old, no one could ignore what she said as a child's words. There were many girls of 13 or 14 years old who talked about marriage, so they were no longer children. With a buffer of nearly 3 years, it was not so easy for Duke Xing's mansion to control her. Moreover, some situations had changed a lot in the past 3 years. Duke Xing's mansion did not dare to go too far. This time, she came back with Chu Liuchen's life-saving grace. Don't worry, Nanny. Ask the people in our courtyard to come to see me in the corridor first. Xiao Wanru thought for a moment and said, Yes, I'll ask them to come here right away. Nanny Yu nodded. Since Xiao Wanru entered the Piaoyun courtyard, it was necessary to establish her prestige. The people sent by Madame of Duke Xing only looked good, but Nanny Yu could not find out for the time being whether they were loyal or who they worked for. After Nanny Yu called all the people over and tidied them up, Xiao Wanru came out with Chu Lu, Yu Jie and Qing Yu and stood in the corridor. Nanny Zheng did not come out, because Xiao Wanru had other arrangements. There were more than a dozen second-class and third-class servant girls and old maids standing in the courtyard, and all of them looked at the miss standing in the corridor in amazement. She was the least favored fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion. They didn't expect her to be so outstanding. The servants of Duke Xing's mansion had always been the proudest of their first Mississippi. There was no miss from an aristocratic family who could compare with the first miss in the capital city. But what was wrong with the one in front of them? Didn't they say that the fifth miss was the worst? She was also the least favored by old madam and madam, but no one expected that the fifth miss was so beautiful. Even if she stood in the corridor with a straight face, she was still breathtakingly beautiful. However, compared with the first miss who had been smiling and dignified, she looked a little more fierce. At first glance, they could tell that she was not to be trifled with. Didn't they say that she had no confidence without the favor of old madam and madam? Why was the fifth Miss Xiao so confident? It seemed that she was going to deal with the servants fiercely? Without the support of old madam and madam, what did she have? The servant girls and old maids whispered to each other in twos and threes. They were so surprised that they couldn't help whispering on the spot. Of course, there was a limit to their discussion. Anyway, the fifth miss hadn't said anything yet, so it was okay for them to just whisper a few words. Chapter 643. Xiao Wanru looked at the servants in front of her with deep eyes. In fact, Nanny Yu had made a good choice. If she ignored their attitudes, they looked sincere and seemed to be able to work. However, Nanny Yu might not be able to deal with them for the time being because they didn't know the rules. When she went out just now, Nanny Zheng also told Xiao Wanru that after these old maids and servant girls entered the Piaoyun courtyard, Nanny Yu had beaten them a few times, but she didn't beat them hard. After all, Xiao Wanru was not in the mansion, so she, as a supervisor, couldn't really deal with them. Before she came out just now, Nanny Zheng told Xiao Wanru all the things she had heard before. Most of the servant girls and old maids who came this time were born in Duke Xing's mansion. They had been slaves in Duke Xing's mansion for generations and had a complicated relationship with the servants in other courtyards. Even if she wanted to get rid of them in a short time, she couldn't. Moreover, once she did it, it would affect the whole body. Because Xiao Wanru had been silent, the discussion in the courtyard became louder. The servant girls and old maids, who had been a little vigilant, became presumptuous. They thought that the fifth miss only looked a little powerful, but had no confidence after all. She was just a silver spearhead made of wax, just to coax people. Pull this old maid out. Xiao Wanru looked at them coldly for a long time, and suddenly pointed at the old maid who stood in the middle and spoke the most enthusiastically. She was the supervisor old maid mentioned by Nanny Jing just now. She was also the old maid sent by Madame of Duke Xing to manage this group of people. Speaking of which, this old maid was sent by old Madame. In front of old Madame, Xiao Wanru saw that old Madame looked at her with disdain when she went out just now. Yu Jie went over and pulled the old maid, who was talking with joy. She used too much force, so the old maid staggered out of the crowd and fell in front of Xiao Wanru after a few steps. The old maid cried out in pain and wanted to curse. However, when she saw Xiao Wanru's cold eyes, she couldn't help but shrink. But she immediately came to her senses and wanted to get up with her hands on the ground. However, the hem of her clothes was stepped on by Yu Jie, so she couldn't get up. The courtyard immediately fell silent. Although some old maids and servant girls here had their own relationships, their relationship was not as good as the one in front of them. Although this old maid was not a first-class supervisor in Madame Dowager's courtyard, she could speak in front of Madame Dowager and was more dignified than others. A servant girl leaning against the gate of the courtyard glanced at Xiao Wanru cleverly, and then lowered her head and shrunk her shoulders. She carefully moved to the gate of the courtyard, turned around, and ran out to deliver the message. In the corridor, a trace of sarcasm flashed across Xiao Wanru's eyes. Sure enough, her courtyard would not be clean. What do you mean, fifth miss? After being stepped on by Yu Jie, the old maid couldn't get up after being pressed on the ground a few times. She looked at Xiao Wanru in front of her with a little anger out of shame. Xiao Wanru looked at her calmly. Her eyes were deep and bottomless, as if there were two pools of cold spring water in them, without any warmth. She was still wearing the black robe she wore in the nunnery, but the light black robe made her look a little fierce and cold. There was no expression on her delicate face, and she looked down at the old maid coldly. The old maid couldn't help swallowing a mouthful of saliva secretly because of her imposing manner. Wasn't the fifth miss a pitiful person? She shouldn't be weeping and complaining when she was wronged. But even if she complained, so what? In this manner, there was no master who took her seriously. Are you a second-class old maid assigned to this courtyard? Xiao Wanru said coldly with her face as cold as ice. I was sent by old madam as a second-class old maid. When madam sent me here, she said that I would be a first-class old maid. The old maid said with dissatisfaction. Before she came here, madam did say so. She was a servant of old madam, so it was reasonable for her to be sent here to be a first-class supervisor nanny. In the past, the second-class old maids of old madam were promoted to first class in this way. However, when she arrived here, she found that there was already a supervisor nanny in this courtyard, and this supervisor nanny was sent here by Ru, and great elder princess. She said that she was Xiao Wanru's supervisor nanny and her wet nurse. With such an identity and great elder princess's words, this matter was settled. Moreover, at that time, Duke Xing's mansion was in the wrong, so they couldn't really make trouble for an old maid. Therefore, this second-class old maid, who had planned to be a supervisor nanny, was just transferred to the Piaoyuan courtyard and couldn't be regarded as a promotion. Speaking of this, the old maid was full of resentment. How can I use more of old madam's servants? I have a lot of servants here. You'd better send old madam's servants back. Xiao Wanru said coldly. Yes, miss. Before the old maid could react, Yu Jie put down her foot that was stepping on the hem of the clothes and dragged the old maid out. Fifth miss, I was sent by old madam to serve you. I didn't do anything wrong, and I didn't offend Fifth Mississippi. Why did Fifth Miss come here and punish me indiscriminately? Is it because I was sent by old madam? The old maid also came to her senses at this time. She struggled with Yu Jie's hand, who was pulling her collar, and said loudly with a red face. If she was dragged out by Yu Jie in front of so many people, she would not be able to live in Duke Xing's mansion in the future. Perhaps because of her anger, she exerted a lot of strength at this time. She was evenly matched with Yu Jie, and no one could do anything to the other. Her words also showed that she was old Madam's servant. Even if Xiao Wanru was dissatisfied, she couldn't do anything to her. Slap her, Xiao Wanru said coldly. Yu Jie grabbed the old maid's hand tightly with both hands, and Xiao Lu went over and slapped the old maid hard in the face twice. The old maid was stunned and even forgot to struggle. She looked at Xiao Wanru in front of her almost in disbelief. She had already shown her identity as Xiao Wanru. How could she dare to hurt her? She was old Madam's servant. The two slaps were very loud and crisp, which made everyone in the courtyard tremble. None of them had seen Xiao Wanru before, and they had imagined what kind of person Fifth Miss Xiao was. They all thought that even if Fifth Miss Xiao had Wu and Great Elder Princess's support, she was just a little poor girl. After all, her maternal grandmother was her maternal grandmother. How could she be more powerful than her maternal grandmother? In the past, when she was not in the mansion, she could still rely on her maternal grandmother's power. But after entering the mansion, she was at the mercy of old Madam and Madam. Even though these people were selected to enter the Piaoyun courtyard, few of them really took Xiao Wanru seriously. Moreover, Xiao Wanru came from a small place. In their hearts, she was just a timid miss who had not seen much of the world. They were afraid that they would not even dare to scold the servants because of the complicated relationship behind them. However, they did not expect that the fifth miss in front of them would make them change their minds dramatically. The beautiful fifth miss in front of them was so simple and rude. She didn't have any tricks, but she was more direct than any tricks. Looking at the old maid's red and swollen cheeks, the rest of the maids and old maids felt that their cheeks were also painful, and none of them dared to say a word. They just waited for the development of the matter. The maids and old maids were doubtful about how to deal with this matter next. Would it be a big storm or a weekend? But at this time, no one would be stupid enough to stand up for Xiao Wanru. They just waited to see how Xiao Wanru would deal with this old maid. Fifth miss, I'm old Madam's servant. Even if I made a mistake, you can't punish me as you like. The old maid was knocked out and then heavily pressed to the ground by Yu Jie. She was so angry that she was trembling all over. Even in front of old Madam, she had some dignity. She had never been so humiliated. She had wanted to bear it, but at this time, she couldn't bear it anymore. She shouted loudly with a ferocious face. Even though she was pressed tightly by Yu Jie, the old maid struggled desperately. Her face turned red and her neck became thick. It could be seen that she was unwilling to give up. Old Madam's servant? Xiao Wanru said coldly and raised her eyebrows. Although the expression on her face was not serious, it was full of disdain in the old maid's eyes. Fifth miss, do you look down on me or old Madam? The old maid, who was angry, said loudly. Are you sure you are old Madam's servant? Xiao Wanru asked. Of course I am old Madam's servant. Old Madam asked me to serve Fifth miss, but she didn't want you to humiliate me. Fifth miss, if you don't show me any respect, you will show old Madam no respect. The old maid said angrily. Her hand hurt because of Yu Jie's press, and she became more and more angry. If it weren't for Yu Jie's great strength, she would definitely overturn Yu Jie and then slap Yu Jie hard in front of Xiao Wanru. But now, the opportunity actually came. Sensing that Yu Jie's hand behind her was loosened, the old maid immediately counterattacked. She pounced on Yu Jie and slapped hard on Yu Jie's face. Yu Jie was not prepared for the old maid's sudden counterattack. She took 2 steps back and bumped into the 2 people behind her. As a result, the old maid's slap hit the face of the old maid behind Yu Jie just now. The slap was not light. The old maid standing behind Yu Jie was suddenly slapped and jumped up in pain with a cry. Several servant girls and old maids around were suddenly hit by the old maid, who suddenly jumped up and bumped into others. The rest of the people stepped back, and the whole place was in a mess. What happened here? An unhappy voice suddenly came from the gate of the courtyard. Everyone looked back and saw Madame of Duke Xing standing at the gate with a large group of servant girls and old maids. Although she looked calm, there was a little displeasure in her eyes. There was another woman beside her, but Xiao Wanru had never seen her before. Standing beside Madame of Duke Xing, even though she was still young, she was not suppressed by Madame of Duke Xing's momentum. In the corridor, Xiao Wanru raised her pink cherry lips. So this was brought by Madame of Duke Xing to suppress her. Chapter 644. Madam, please save me. The fifth miss is going to beat me to death. Seeing Madame of Duke Xing coming over, the old maid immediately became more confident. She rushed to Madame of Duke Xing, knelt on the ground and cried loudly. She cried while wiping her tears. What happened? The fifth miss just came back. Why did it become like this? Madame of Duke Xing looked up at Xiao Wanru in the corridor. Seeing her walking over slowly, she frowned and said. Her voice was not loud. It seemed that she was talking to herself or to the old maid. The old maid was full of grievances. She finally met someone who could stand up for her. Hearing Madame of Duke Xing's question, she immediately told what had happened before with exaggerated details. In her words, she was the most aggrieved loyal servant, while Xiao Wanru was the evil master, not an ordinary evil master, but an evil master who had no filial piety. After all, she used to work in old Madame's courtyard. The woman who came in with Madame of Duke Xing glanced at Xiao Wanru with disdain and strong sarcasm. Greetings, second aunt. Xiao Wanru came over and bowed deeply to Madame of Duke Xing. At this time, the old maid had finished telling the story. While wiping her tears, she looked at Xiao Wanru proudly. She didn't believe that Xiao Wanru dared to do anything to her in front of Madame. She was just an orphan girl, and an unfavored orphan girl at that. Could she really turn the sky upside down? Wanru, let her get up and let the servants disperse. She just came back and made such a scene. It's not good for others to see it. If you are really dissatisfied, tell me in detail when you go in later and tell me who you are dissatisfied with. I will ask someone to arrange someone else to come in. Madame of Duke Xing said to Xiao Wanru softly. Second aunt, do you think I shouldn't deal with her? Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows. Although her voice was soft, her tone was not gentle. It's not that you shouldn't deal with her. You just came back to clean up a courtyard. If you find anything inappropriate, you can talk about it. It's not good to deal with her without saying anything. Madame of Duke Xing explained in a good temper. Second aunt, do you mean that I shouldn't deal with her? Just now, the old maid said that she was originally Grandma's servant, so she naturally refused to be disciplined by me. In this case, what's wrong with staying for a period of time? Xiao Wanru said unhurriedly and didn't intend to give in. Child, how can you talk like this? Second aunt thinks that even if the old maid is in trouble, we can deal with her slowly. Madame of Duke Xing persuaded her softly. Second aunt, do you mean that as long as it's grandmother or someone close to second aunt, even if they commit a crime, I can't punish them immediately? In this case, send this old maid to the official. I can't solve this problem. Xiao Wanru said lightly and glanced at the old maid who was still kneeling on the ground with an aggrieved look. Madam to say. Madam of Xing, Madam, to say. Second Madam, to Madam Xiao, Xing, to say. Madam, with Xing said and Wu and Xing raised with, Madam, to Madam. Qing said. Madam, Madam. Madame of Duke Xing also felt sarcastic in her heart. Xiao Wanru is from a small place. Isn't it a trivial thing? However, the more confused Xiao Wanru was, the better it was for her. She brought Infanta Yuan and here today in order to let Infanta Yuan and be a witness. Old Madame couldn't say anything to the Empress Dowager, but Infanta Yuan could. It's just a trivial thing. Second aunt, look. Xiao Wanru said coldly and gestured to Yu Jie beside her. Yu Jie took 2 steps forward and pulled the old maid up from the ground. She touched the old maid's cuff, took out a small box, and handed it to Madame of Duke Xing. When I entered the door just now, I saw her sneaking out from inside. When I asked Nanny Yu to bring them together, she deliberately picked on people in the yard to talk to. When I asked her to come over and wanted to investigate her, she said that she was grandmother's woman and that I couldn't touch her at will. Xiao Wanru looked calmly at Madame of Duke Xing, whose face was stiff, and said, Second aunt, since this person is grandma's servant, why did she put her in my yard to serve me? If she is the servant who serves me, why is she still grandma's servant? If we don't deal with such a person, are we going to deal with her after she buys the thing? The smile on Madame of Duke Xing's face froze. She looked at the small gift box in Yu Jie's hand in astonishment. The exquisite patterns on it showed that it didn't belong to the mansion. Since it didn't belong to the mansion and was so exquisite, Madame of Duke Xing couldn't help but raise her eyebrows twice. She thought of where this thing came from. It was a gift from the Empress Dowager. Most of those gifts were left by old Madame in her yard, and a small part was sent to Xiao Wanru's Piaoyun courtyard. Could it be that this old maid was so bold that she dared to secretly touch one of them? Madam, I didn't do it. I don't know what it is or where it came from. You must have deliberately put it on me. As soon as the old maid saw the box in Yu Jie's hand, her face changed dramatically in panic and she hurriedly cried out that she was wronged. Second aunt, don't we need to send this person to the official? After all, this thing looks very unusual. Xiao Wanru didn't look at the old maid's flustered face, raised her watery eyes, and looked at Madame of Duke Xing and said, "Let me have a look." Infanta Yuan, and reached out and took the box from Yu Jie's hand. Looking at the gorgeous style with golden patterns on the box, her face also became strange. This is from the palace. This old maid is so bold. Originally, she just looked down on Xiao Wanru. Now she felt that the whole Duke Xing's mansion was not very well behaved. How dare an old maid steal an offering from the palace? How bold she was. Second aunt, do you think we should send her to the official? Xiao Wanru still said unhurriedly. I'll make a decision after reporting it to old Madame. If it's true, this evil old maid must be beaten to death. Madame of Duke Xing gritted her teeth and had to say with a flattering smile. Second aunt, when I came in, these people all talked about me and didn't treat me as their master. At this time, this old maid even jumped out to take me seriously and said that she worked for Grandma. If other people jump out later and say that they worked for you or Grandma, what should I do? Xiao Wanru didn't pursue the matter of the old maid anymore. She changed the topic and brought the matter to all the servants in the courtyard. She took a step back in order to advance. She took a step back in front of the old maid. It was impossible for Madame of Duke Xing to repeatedly ignore her in dealing with the servants in the courtyard, especially when this old maid took the gift from the Empress Dowager. If this matter was really brought to the official and the Empress Dowager, Madame of Duke Xing could imagine that the Empress Dowager would be furious. At this time, she could only coax Xiao Wanru and stop her from making trouble. You can choose these people. If you don't like them, Madame of Duke Xing had to give in on this matter. Can I not like all of them? Second aunt, can you please ask an old maid to come here tomorrow? I want to choose some new servants. The servants in the mansion should serve the masters they used to serve. I can't let other masters be served by fewer servants because of me. Xiao Wanru said. Her words sounded nice and seemed to be for the sake of other masters in the mansion. But with the scene in front of her, the meaning was not as good as it seemed. Madame of Duke Xing was so aggrieved that she almost couldn't control herself and crumpled the handkerchief in her hand. She had intended to suppress Xiao Wanru with Infanta Yuan, but she didn't expect that not only did she fail to do so, but also Infanta Yuan, and saw this scene in front of her. The matter of the box was probably Xiao Wanru's scheme. But this kind of thing couldn't be investigated clearly, and no one could prove her innocence for this old maid. Forcing her to agree to choose new servants in front of Infanta Yuan was like slapping her in the face. But in this situation, she just couldn't say no. Since Wanru is not satisfied, ask an old maid to come here tomorrow. Madame of Duke Xing almost forced these words out of her teeth. She thought that she had good self-restraint, but at this time, she almost couldn't bear it. Thank you, second aunt. Xiao Wanru said with a sweet smile, as if she didn't have any ulterior motives. Seeing this, Madame of Duke Xing almost exploded with anger. But she couldn't say anything. Second aunt, take this old maid away and deal with her. I hope you can find out the truth. Maybe this old maid is wronged. Xiao Wanru looked at the old maid, who was almost paralyzed on the ground and shivering in fear, and said lightly, the thing given by the Empress Dowager appeared on this old maid, and it happened when Xiao Wanru just returned to the courtyard of Duke Xing's mansion. If it wasn't this old maid who did it, someone had to be found to take the blame. The people in this courtyard couldn't stand the interrogation one by one. Although these people didn't take the thing given by the Imperial Palace, they might find out something else. Madame of Duke Xing had specially selected some problematic people who were sent here at the beginning. No matter who was left here, there must be something wrong with them. Wanru, don't worry. Old Madam and I will definitely find out the truth. I will never let you be wronged. Madame of Duke Xing had to promise to show her innocence. Thank you, second aunt. As long as you don't think I've gone beyond the rules. Xiao Wanru became more and more gentle. She bowed sideways to Madame of Duke Xing with a smile. Her behavior was in accordance with the rules, and no one could find any fault with her. A trace of gloomy anger flashed in Madame of Duke Xing's eyes, but she still had to show a gentle and comforting smile. She had to suffer this grievance in silence. She had thought that Xiao Wanru would at least clean up the servants after she entered the mansion for a period of time. After such a period of time, it would be impossible to clean up all the servants even if she wanted to. Unexpectedly, Xiao Wanru was so simple and rude that she disrupted all her plans as soon as she entered the mansion. Now she had to retreat in defeat. In front of all the servants in the courtyard who were about to be driven away, Madame of Duke Xing felt that she had never been so embarrassed since she married into Duke Xing's mansion. Wanru, have a good rest. I'll take them away first. Madame of Duke Xing said reluctantly. Thank you, second aunt. Xiao Wanru bowed politely again. The more polite her behavior was, the angrier Madame of Duke Xing would be. But she had to bear it at the moment. It was related to the Empress Dowager's matter, so she couldn't make a big loss. She had to suffer this grievance in silence. She gritted her teeth, winked at the people around her, and then turned to leave. Madame of Duke Xing, please wait a minute. A cold voice suddenly sounded beside her and stopped Madame of Duke Xing, who was about to leave. Xiao Wanru stopped and rolled her watery eyes. Although she looked surprised, her eyes were clear. She had guessed right. It was not over yet. Since she had seen it, how could she ignore it? If she really didn't hear about it, it would be another sin. Chapter 645. Madame of Duke Xing, why don't you check it? After all, it belongs to the Imperial Palace? Infantiyun raised her eyes and asked curiously, as if she really just asked casually. Of course, but this matter is related to Old Madam, so we have to start with Old Madam. Madame of Duke Xing made an excuse with a hollow smile. Although it is more convenient to start with Old Madam, how dare she be so bold? Infantiyun then looked at the servant girls and old maids in the courtyard and said. The expression on Madame of Duke Xing's face almost froze. Although they were all servant girls and old maids, each of these servant girls and old maids had something to do with other servants in the mansion. If they were all punished, the whole Duke Xing's mansion would not be peaceful, and there would even be many troubles. Moreover, these people could not be investigated. It was absolutely impossible to investigate in this way. But if Xiao Wanru said this as an elder, she could still make the excuse to Old Madam. But it was Infantiyun who said this. At this time, Madame of Duke Xing regretted bringing Infantiyun here. She had thought that Infantiyun was a witness of Xiao Wanru's tyranny and rudeness. Infantiyun could let Infantiyun see Xiao Wanru disrespect the elders and punish the servants given by the elders on the first day she came to the mansion. Unexpectedly, she shot herself in the foot at this time. Come on, lock these people up first. Before the truth comes to light, they are not allowed to meet anyone. Madame of Duke Xing gritted her teeth and had to say. She had thought of muddling through this matter, but now it was definitely impossible to push the old maids out. When she went back, she had to discuss with her daughter how many people to push and which ones were suitable. But if she pushed more people as the mistress of the mansion, she would be criticized. Thinking that others would definitely say that she had bad intentions behind her back, Madame of Duke Xing was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. It happened in front of Infantiyun, and it was the reward from the Imperial Palace that was stolen. Originally, she had planned to use an old maid as a scapegoat to fool the matter. But since Infantiyun had already said it, she could not make it a big deal into a small one. Maybe the Empress Dowager would ask about it in person one day. At that time, if her mansion could not answer correctly, it would be reprimanded by the Empress Dowager. "Madam, you are really fair." Infantine and smiled slightly and looked at the servant girls and old maids who were taken away by a group of people. Then she turned to Xiao Wanru and looked her up and down as if she had just seen her. After looking her up and down for a few times, she said slowly, "Are you the granddaughter of Ru and great elder princess and the fifth miss of Duke Xing's mansion?" Xiao Wanru bowed sideways and nodded gently and politely. "I'm the granddaughter of Ruiping Grand Elder Princess, Princess Yuan. I Xing, S. Chu. I, Xing Yuan's Wang Xing is. I Princess I, to Wang's daughter, Xing Yuan, and said, Xing Yuan Oat said. Xiao Wanru's heart skipped a beat. She remembered who Xing Yuan and was. Xing Yuan and was Chu Liuzhou's wife, the future princess of Zhou. She had long heard that Xing Yuan and was dignified and decent, and was highly praised by the misses from aristocratic families. In her last life, Xing Yuan and did marry Chu Liuzhou and almost became the crown princess. If Chu Liuzhou hadn't rebelled, Xing Yuan and would have been the crown princess in her last life. Xiao Wanru had been in the Imperial Palace at that time. Although she had never seen Xing Yuan and had a good reputation in the Imperial Palace. However, something happened later. Prince Zhou was defeated and killed by mistake. Although Xing Yuan, who almost became the crown princess, was safe, she, who had no son or daughter, lost her power and had to guard Prince Zhou's mansion, which was declining. When she died, Princess Yuan and was still alive and well. "Greetings, Infanta Yuan-sun." Xiao Wanru was not surprised and bowed again. Although her maternal grandma and Ruiping Great Elder Princess were both princesses, they were not very close. Ruiping Great Elder Princess married a son from an aristocratic family and later inherited the title. Her life was quite smooth. She not only had a son, but also a daughter. Now she even had grandchildren. Infanta Yuan and was even conferred the title of Infanta not long after she was born. It could be said that she was both honored and powerful. She was really the best choice for the crown princess, even better than Xiao Yanru. After all, she was a real Infanta with a fief. Although you are the granddaughter of Great Elder Princess, you can't go too far. Madame of Duke Xing is always in charge of Duke Xing's mansion. Infanta Yuan then said with a smile and bowed sideways, looking extremely kind. Although her words were not very pleasant, they were acceptable with her kind attitude. As a descendant of Great Elder Princess, her words of exhortation were very convincing. Moreover, people would think that she was reasonable and sensible. Even though she was a member of the royal family, she did not take advantage of her power to bully others. On the contrary, Xiao Wanru in front of them immediately made people feel that she was taking advantage of her power because of her words, even though what had happened before was obviously Madame of Duke Xing's fault. Madame of Duke Xing, who had been smiling stiffly on the side, relaxed her face and looked like a spring breeze. "Thank you for your advice, Your Highness." Xiao Wanru raised her eyebrows slightly and bowed respectfully to Infanta Yuan and again. Although she looked angry, she still behaved very well. After bowing, she lowered her head slightly and seemed to be listening to Infanta Yuan and respectfully. As a descendant of Great Elder Princess, even though Infanta Yuan and had the title of Infanta, they were of the same generation and met for the first time. Therefore, her so-called advice was a little strange. Thinking of Xiao Wanru's indignant face, she had to suppress her anger and listen to Infanta Yuan and according to the rules. It made people feel that Infanta Yuan, who looked kind, was taking advantage of her power. Infanta Yuan and looked at Xiao Wanru's slightly lowered head calmly and frowned slightly. She didn't expect that Xiao Wanru would be so difficult to deal with. She had thought that she could suppress Xiao Wanru with her status as an Infanta, but she didn't expect that Xiao Wanru's words made people feel that she was taking advantage of her power because of her power. Fortunately, they were only in Duke Xing's mansion. If Xiao Wanru said the same words in the Imperial Palace, she was afraid that she would be in a difficult situation. She became vigilant and no longer dared to look down on this outstanding cousin. Xiao Wanru was indeed her cousin, but she didn't take her seriously at all before. Even though Xiao Wanru was outstanding and beautiful, she was just a good-looking plaything. But now, she didn't dare to look down on the fifth Miss Xiao in front of her anymore. Don't mention it. We are cousins, so you don't have to be so polite. Today, I came to the mansion to look for the first Miss Xiao, so I have something to say to you. If I come to the mansion next time, I will definitely come to visit you. Infanta Yuan, and said with a smile, as if she didn't see Xiao Wanru's silent resistance, and was extremely amiable. It seemed that she really wanted to be Xiao Wanru's sister. Infanta Yuan, and you're being too polite. It's my first time to come to the mansion. It's a mess here, and now there are no servants to serve the guests. If you come to the mansion in the future, I will definitely treat you well. Xiao Wanru raised her head, and her eyes were also gentle, as if the indignation just now was just someone's fault. She was telling the truth. There had been a lot of servants in the courtyard, but now they had all been taken away. There were only a few of them left. There were not enough servants. Besides, she had just returned to the mansion, so it was indeed inconvenient for her to receive guests. It doesn't matter. I'll come to visit you next time. By the way, I'll hold a banquet in a few days. Why don't I send you an invitation? You can come at that time. We can get close to each other. Infanta Yuan then suggested with a smile. I'm afraid I can't do that. I'm still in the mourning period for my parents. Xiao Wanru refused in embarrassment. Oh, that's right. It's my fault. I didn't expect this, so I can only talk about it after you finish the mourning period. I originally wanted to introduce you to other misses from aristocratic families. Infanta Yuan, and said with regret. Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness. Xiao Wanru said softly. The two of them had a pleasant talk. After a few more intimate words, Infanta Yuan and left with a smile. Seeing her leave with Madame of Duke Xing, the smile on Xiao Wanru's face gradually faded. She looked at Infanta Yuan and's back with deep eyes and seemed to be thinking about something. In her last life, she was not familiar with Infanta Yuan. She only heard that Infanta Yuan and had an excellent reputation. Even after Prince Zhou was defeated, Infanta Yuan and was still fine. She also heard a rumor, but she didn't know whether it was true or not. Now she couldn't remember where she heard it and who told her. It was said that Infanta Yuan and's horoscope was extremely precious. If the rumor was true, it would be no surprise for her to become Princess Zhou. However, in her last life, she didn't hear that Infanta Yuan and Xiao Yanru were close. Later, when Xiao Yanru tortured her with various reasons in the Imperial Palace, she didn't see Infanta Yuan and by Xiao Yanru's side. Unexpectedly, in her rebirth, she saw Infanta Yuan and in Duke Xing's mansion in the morning, which really surprised her. In a few words just now, Infanta Yuan and's attitude changed several times. From indifference at the first meeting to intimacy in the end, Infanta Yuan and even suppressed her, as if she didn't know that she was observing mourning period, invited her to attend the banquet, and said that she would introduce other misses from aristocratic families to Xiao Wanru. Fifth miss, be careful of Infanta. No one knew when Nanny Zheng came out and stood behind Xiao Wanru. Looking at Infanta Yuan and's back, she frowned tightly. Nanny, why do you say that? Xiao Wanru put away the doubts in her eyes, turned to Nanny Zheng and asked. She suspected that Infanta Yuan and did it because of what happened in her last life, but why did Nanny Zheng do it? Infanta Yuan and is one of the Empress Dowager's favorite juniors. She always likes to gossip with the Empress Dowager when she enters the Imperial Palace. The Empress Dowager also likes to listen to Infanta Yuan and's gossip. Every time Infanta Yuan and enters the Imperial Palace, she can make the Empress Dowager happy. Nanny Zheng said as she chose her words. It meant that Infanta Yuan had a say in front of the Empress Dowager. Infanta Yuan and could have a say in front of the Empress Dowager, and she was not a member of Duke Xing's mansion. It seemed that it was not a coincidence that Infanta Yuan and came to Duke Xing's mansion. However, Xiao Yanru didn't know whether it was a coincidence or Infanta Yuan and's doing. Or it could be said that the two of them cooperated. Otherwise, how could it be such a coincidence that she met Infanta Yuan, who had a good relationship with the Empress Dowager, as soon as she came to the mansion? At this time, the Empress Dowager was supporting her in Duke Xing's mansion. The smile on his lips was deep and serene. What a coincidence! Chapter 646. Thank you for coming here, Infanta Yuan. In Xiao Yanru's room, Xiao Yanru picked up a cup of tea, stood up, bowed sideways to Infanta Yuan, and said softly, "We don't need to stand on ceremony." Infanta Yuan said with a smile, picked up the tea, took a sip, took her hand, asked her to sit down, and said helplessly, "It's not a big deal. I just want to support you, but I didn't expect that your fifth sister is not simple. I don't know if I've done more harm than good." Xiao Yanru knew that Infanta Yuan was talking about letting her mother deal with the servants in the courtyard, so she said politely at once, "Infanta, you don't need to say that. It's my mother's fault for not disciplining them well. I didn't expect that someone would be so bold as to steal the gifts given by the Empress Dowager. She would not bear the responsibility. Not knowing was the best reason." "It's great that you think so." Infanta Yuan took her hand and said with a smile, "Since the gift was given by the Empress Dowager, we can't let it be ignored, let alone let a servant steal it. If this kind of thing is spread out, it will not only sound bad, but also make the Empress Dowager angry. I know. Just now, I also went to persuade grandmother to investigate this matter. We can't let a servant ruin our plan and misunderstand our mansion. Princess, please explain this matter to Empress Dowager." Xiao Yanru sighed softly and held Infanta Yuan's hand with tears in her beautiful eyes, looking extremely aggrieved. "Don't worry, I will tell the Empress Dowager about this. Speaking of this, you can't be blamed for it. It's always the servants who are disappointing. I'm afraid it's also because the master, fifth miss, is not in the courtyard. Those servants see that there is no serious master in the courtyard, so they have other ideas." Infanta Yuan comforted her gently. "That's true. It's just that the courtyard was not prepared in a hurry, but and Great Elder Princess intervened. We can't disobey and Great Elder Princess's order, so we prepared it early and selected servants to be assigned to it. I didn't expect that the servants had some ideas because the courtyard was prepared early and there was no master in the courtyard." Xiao Yanru nodded and said, "Both of them were trying to exonerate Duke Xing's mansion from the blame. They meant that it was not the servants' fault. At that time, the servants had been sent to Duke Xing's mansion, but because there was no master to control them, the servants had neglected them, which led to today's incident. In general, it was because the servants had been allocated a courtyard early and there was no master to control them. The reason was not Duke Xing's mansion's fault. As for Madam of Duke Xing, the responsibility of the Madam of Duke Xing was reduced a lot. After all, it was good when she arranged servants at that time. But now it was not good, so she couldn't be blamed. After all, there was no serious master in the Piaoyun courtyard. If something happened, Madam of Duke Xing couldn't be blamed. With Infanta Yuan's words as a cushion, Xiao Yanru felt relieved. Infanta Yuan had a say in the Empress Dowager and had a good reputation. It was said that Infanta Yuan was fair. Since Infanta Yuan said so here, she would say the same to the Empress Dowager. It could be regarded as a disguised explanation for what had happened just now for Duke Xing's mansion. It was just a story. Duke Xing's mansion didn't have such a big responsibility. Even and Great Elder Princess shouldn't interfere in the affairs of other mansions. Your Duke Xing's mansion can refute such an inappropriate request." Infanta Yuan then said softly. She was completely on Xiao Yanru's side, which could make others have a good impression on her. But she is fifth sister's grandmother. For the sake of fifth sister, how can and Great Elder Princess not interfere? Xiao Yanru sighed softly and said helplessly. Then she lowered her head and gently wiped the corners of her eyes with a handkerchief. When she raised her head again, she could only see her slightly red eyes. However, she showed a decent smile and said reluctantly, "Well, let's not talk about it. Grandma and mother will deal with it. I'm really sorry for troubling Infanta Yuan and to come here. I just wanted to make use of your power, but I made you feel wronged. I apologize to you on behalf of our Duke Xing's mansion." Someone had already reported what had happened in the Piaoyun courtyard to Xiao Yanru, and she also knew that Infanta Yuan had not been treated well by Xiao Wanru. At this time, Infanta Yuan mentioned it vaguely in order to provoke Infanta Yuan's anger. However, she said it very sincerely, as if she was sincere. Moreover, she took the initiative to point out the fault, which made others feel that Xiao Yinru was a good person. It's just a trifle. Since there's nothing else, I'll go back first. I have to go to the Imperial Palace later. The Empress Dowager has sent someone to tell me before. With a flash in her eyes, Infanta Yuan and stood up with a smile, as if she didn't hear the provocation in Xiao Yinru's words. I'll see you off, Infanta. Xiao Yinru also stood up. First, Miss Xiao, you don't have to be so polite. We don't have to do this. Go to help your mother deal with what happened today. After all, it belongs to the Imperial Palace and can't be treated casually. If the Empress Dowager asks about it, I will report it truthfully. We can't let the Empress Dowager know that your mansion didn't deal with it. Infanta Yuan, and said with a smile, patted Xiao Yinru's hand affectionately, and then left with her people, as if she didn't see Xiao Yinru's slightly stiff face. Although she didn't like Xiao Wanru, she didn't intend to be a sharp knife in Xiao Yinru's hand. Originally, she thought that with her identity, she could easily intimidate Xiao Wanru, but she found that Xiao Wanru was not as simple as she appeared to be. In this case, she wouldn't simply take a side. She could completely wait for the change. Her grandma said that her identity couldn't escape from being a princess, and it depended on which prince's mansion she entered. Xiao Yinru was her biggest competitor. In fact, the courtyard of the Piaoyun courtyard had been well kept, and it looked good on the outside. However, in addition to some good decorations sent by the eldest princess for her before, some simple and ordinary decorations arranged by Duke Xing's mansion for her could be seen from time to time in the interior. The entire Piaoyun courtyard looked bright on the surface. In fact, it was not very good, but Xiao Wanru still had to bear this kind of grievance. Because she was still observing filial piety and cultivating in seclusion, she had to bear it no matter how ordinary it was. Now she had to bear it like this. In the end, even if she stopped observing filial piety and cultivating in seclusion, she couldn't say anything more. After all, she didn't say anything when she moved in. If she said anything after that, it would be a little too superficial. It would make it seem that everything she had done before was just superficial for others to see. When the time came, everything would return to normal, and she would still do what she should do. Although it was unexpected for Xiao Wanru to return to the mansion at this time, she had already agreed that she would go down the mountain before the spring festival. At that time, she hadn't finished observing filial piety, but she would stay in the mansion for a few days. Even if she went down the mountain at that time, it would be inconvenient for her to interfere with the decorations in the room. On the one hand, it was naturally because of observing filial piety, and on the other hand, there were many things to do during the spring festival. Even if it was a little messy, it was understandable. Miss, they have gone too far. In the room, Nanny Yu angrily told her what had happened during this period of time, and then pointed to a screen behind her and said, "This screen is obviously not good, but no one has come to replace it. I looked for Madam, but Madam said that this screen was arranged by Old Madam. I went to look for Old Madam again, but Old Madam said that it was Madam who was in charge of this matter." The more Nanny Yu said, the angrier she became. In fact, this was not the only thing. Many things in this room were so ordinary that they looked shabby and ridiculous. How could such decorations be placed in front of her miss? The more Nanny Yu thought about it, the angrier she became. However, even if she looked for all the masters in the mansion, they were all pushed out. Moreover, most of the time, she didn't see these masters at all. They were just sent away by their trusted subordinates in front of them. Even if they really made a scene, they could pretend that they didn't know. She couldn't find anyone even if she wanted to. Moreover, Xiao Wanru couldn't take the initiative to look for them now. She could cultivate in seclusion on the mountain. How could she make a scene because her decorations were not gorgeous enough after returning to the mansion? Madam of Duke Xing also did this because she had figured this out. After Nanny Yu told her all the sufferings, Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and turned her eyes to the screen behind her. This screen was a big screen with 12 fans. In terms of scale, it was really big. Even the screen placed in Old Madam's room just now was probably not so big. If it was just this, no one would think that Duke Xing's mansion treated them badly. Such a big screen with 12 fans was also placed in their room. In the whole Duke Xing's mansion, only Old Madam's room had a big screen with 12 fans. The material of this screen was also very good. It was made of the best pear wood, but the embroidery on it was a little old. Not only was it old, but the edges were also frayed. The originally beautiful flower patterns on it were already blurred, and even looked a little rotten. Some of the threads had already been burnt off. No matter how one looked at it, it was very old, and it made people feel extremely uncomfortable. From the extremely beautiful peony in spring to the extraordinary red plum in winter, it should be amazing no matter from which angle one looked at it. But now it was old and musty. In fact, it wasn't just this screen. There were other decorations as well. Most of them were old, and they were ornaments that should have been abandoned a long time ago, or should have been repaired before being used again. Yet they were placed so openly in this room. "Miss, they are too much." Yujia looked around the whole room and said angrily. Compared to when they had moved in 3 years ago, there was a world of difference. At that time, the decorations were extremely gorgeous, and each piece was obviously meticulously prepared. Even after some time, they had been refurbished and looked as if they were brand new. But now, no matter how they looked at it, it was obvious that they had been used by someone else, or that they were old and could no longer be used. They were put out without any tidying or repairing. "Miss, let's ask Great Elder Princess to come and have a look." Chulu was also very angry. "We can't always turn to my grandma." Xiao Wanru shook her head. Ri and Great Elder Princess could not repeatedly intervene in the affairs of Duke Xing's mansion, otherwise it would inevitably arouse the displeasure of the Emperor and the Empress Dowager. She could not let her grandma intervene in the affairs of Duke Xing's mansion. Even if she wanted to intervene, she could only intervene in Hao-er's affairs. She could not waste her time on insignificant things. She would deal with this kind of thing and would not cause more trouble for her grandma. There was a malicious look in her eyes. She would not suffer this silent grievance. "We have to mend and repair it ourselves. We have to find a way to look decent, right?" Chapter 647. Make it up and repair it by herself? How should I do it? Chulu blinked and didn't understand. However, Nanny Zheng beside her seemed to be thinking about something. "Nanny Zheng, is Qi Rongji still living in the mansion?" Xiao Wanru changed the topic and looked at Nanny Zheng, who had been silent all the time. Nanny Yu had been arguing with the people of Duke Xing's mansion in the mansion. As her assistant, Nanny Zheng, who had secretly followed Great Elder Princess's mansion here, was not noticed by the people of Duke Xing's mansion, so it was easier for her to do something. The small gift box given by the Empress Dowager just now was secretly given to Yujie by Nanny Zheng, and then Yujie took advantage of the moment when she pulled the old maid to put the box on the old maid's body. "Miss Qi is still in the mansion, but she is grounded and locked up," Nanny Zheng said. During the period when she came to the mansion, she seemed to be busy every day and seemed to have been helping Nanny Yu with some useless work, but in fact, she had been investigating some things that Xiao Wanru had asked her to investigate before while doing these trivial things. Since what happened before, Miss Qi has been locked up. She is not allowed to go back to the Qi's mansion, but she is allowed to send letters outside, mainly to her eldest brother. Nanny Zheng said in detail. Even if the first young master of the Qi family has great ability, he can't save the first Miss Qi this time. Nanny Yu curled her lips and said, "Didn't she leave Duke Xing's mansion before? Why did she come back?" Xiao Wanru frowned slightly and asked after thinking for a while. Qi Rongji had wanted to see her before. Of course, she might not be the only one who came. I heard that she was caught and brought back. She did leave before and went back to the Qi mansion, but she came back later, and was sent back by the first young master of the Qi family. He said that since Miss Qi was a miss of Duke Xing's mansion, she naturally couldn't leave at will. After sending her back, the first young master of the Qi family left. Nanny Zheng had inquired about it before. Hearing Xiao Wanru's question, she answered casually. She was sent back by Qi Tianyu? After such a thing happened, Qi Rongji returning to Duke Xing's mansion was equal to entering a wolf's den. How could Qi Tianyu send Qi Rongji back? It seemed that Qi Tianyu had been threatened, or someone had promised him great benefits, so he sent Qi Rongji back. He slightly raised the corners of his mouth. Qi Rongji was still in Duke Xing's mansion, which helped him a lot. Originally, he wanted to spend more effort on her, but now it was just the right time. How does Duke Xing's mansion plan to deal with her? Neither Madame of Duke Xing nor Xiao Yanru was a good person. How could they watch Qi Rongji tarnish Xiao Yanru's reputation without doing anything? It didn't seem like Xiao Yanru and Madame of Duke Xing's style to just ground Qi Rongji. I heard that she is going to marry Child Wang. Nanny Jing thought for a while and said, the servants in the mansion said that he is the nephew of Duke Xing, but I have never seen him. Young Master Wang? Wang Xingxue? Xiao Wanru had to sigh that Wang Xingxue was really haunting her. It seemed that he had something to do with her as soon as she came to Duke Xing's mansion. However, it was a good thing if it was him. Qi Rongji didn't know about others, but how could Qi Rongji not know about Wang Xingxue? It would be better to kill her than to marry Wang Xingxue. According to her character, she would definitely try her best to make trouble. But now she didn't make trouble and was grounded peacefully, which meant that it was not what it seemed to be. Could it be that Qi Tianyu had other plans and knew that it was impossible for Wang Xingxue to marry her, so she was grounded peacefully in Duke Xing's mansion? When he thought about it this way, many things immediately made sense. Does Child Wang still live in the mansion? Xiao Wanru asked. No, he only enters the mansion occasionally. Miss Wang still lives in the mansion. It is said that she has been in poor health. Although she can eat some food, she can only lie in bed and is useless. As her brother, he occasionally comes to see her in the name of his sister, but most of the time, he just takes a look at her and spends the rest of the time pleasing Madame of Duke Xing, old Madame and other masters in the mansion. Although Nanny Zheng had never seen Child Wang, she had heard a lot of rumors about him. Everyone in the mansion despised Child Wang. Even the servant girls and old maids were full of contempt when they talked about Child Wang. They all thought that Child Wang was really a loser who could not be supported by the wall. If he were not a relative of their master, they, as servants, would not pay more attention to him. Will he send gifts to the mansion? Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and paid attention to a point that Nanny Jing didn't pay attention to. Yes, he will. He will send gifts to please the masters in the mansion, especially Madame of Duke Xing. His sister has never sent any gifts. Nanny Jing thought for a while and answered. Xiao Wanru's eyes were shining like ink-colored glass, and she raised her pink cherry lips. There must be someone in the mansion who would make trouble. Since there was no one now, she would help them find one. If the matter became serious, the aged ornaments in her room could be made public. Madame of Duke Xing and Xiao Yanru knew that she had to suffer in silence, but she didn't want to. Although Qi Rongji was grounded, it was not very difficult for her to live. The food sent by the kitchen was not bad. Although it was not the food and clothing she used to eat, she had never been valued in Duke Xing's mansion. She had no status in Duke Xing's mansion, so the food and clothing she used could not be worse. This time, it couldn't be any worse. Even because she was locked up, the kitchen specially sent someone to send it over, and it couldn't be too ugly. After all, when her eldest brother sent her back to Duke Xing's mansion that day, he specially went to talk to the first young master of the mansion. Her elder brother's words still rang in her ears. He asked her to stay in Duke Xing's mansion for a period of time. When the matter was almost solved, he would take her back to Qi's mansion. From then on, it had nothing to do with Qi's mansion. However, it was not convenient for her to leave Duke Xing's mansion at this time. This was not a good thing for Duke Xing's mansion and her. For her, such a thing happened in Duke Xing's mansion, and it was related to her. If she left, others would think that she was ungrateful. For Duke Xing's mansion, it was a little too much to drive her away after such a thing happened. They had to find out the matter. Even if they couldn't find out the matter, they had to deal with it after a period of time. Qi Rongji was most obedient to Qi Tianyu. Since her elder brother said so, she certainly came back to Duke Xing's mansion. In order to enter the prince's mansion in the future and make a good future, she certainly could not make trouble at this time. Even if her food and living conditions were not good, she had to endure it. Moreover, her food and living conditions were not bad now, and Duke Xing's mansion did not mistreat her openly. Today, The kitchen sent steamed buns with a few simple dishes. Although they were not very good and Chi Rongji found it difficult to swallow, they were still fresh. Her elder brother had said that he would secretly give the kitchen money to ensure that Chi Rongji would not feel too uncomfortable when eating and using them. Biting the steamed bun weakly, Chi Rongji asked, "Has Xiao Wanru come back?" Although she could not go out, there were many servants talking outside, and even the two old maids guarding the door were talking about it. Even if she did not want to hear it, she could still hear it. "Yes, they said so," Chunyi replied in a low voice. When she was in Jiangzhou, she could be regarded as a respected principal maid in Jiangzhou, but now she became more and more timid. She is so lucky that she is still fine in this situation. Chi Rongji curled her lips and said disdainfully in a cold voice, "If I had known that she was so lucky, I would have tortured her to death with Qin Yuru in Jiangzhou, and then there wouldn't have been so many troubles." Chunyi did not dare to answer and carefully handed a handkerchief to Chi Rongji. Chi Rongji wiped her hands with the handkerchief and bit it hard, as if she was biting Xiao Wanru, who made her jealous. How could she be so lucky to be the granddaughter of an great elder princess? Why didn't she have such luck? Thinking of the days when she and Xiao Wanru were in Jiangzhou in the past and the gap between her and Xiao Wanru now, Chi Rongji was really jealous and hateful. Xiao Wanru had been trampled under her feet in the past and could be bullied as much as she wanted, but now she was living a better life than her. It really made her feel as if there were thousands of caterpillars biting her in her heart, which made her feel indescribably uncomfortable. She wished she could trample on Xiao Wanru again and let herself be tortured by her. "I heard that the Empress Dowager sent a lot of rewards to Xiao Wanru today. Why is Xiao Wanru so lucky? She didn't fall to death on the mountain road and survived by hanging on a tree. Now she was assassinated, but she is still fine and even saved Prince Jin. Is she lucky or not?" Chi Rongji raised the corner of her mouth and sneered viciously. Now she had nothing to do every day, and she was not willing to write or paint quietly. She had been bored. At this time, when she talked about Xiao Wanru, she was even more vicious and mean. Although she had restrained herself because the overall situation in Duke Xing's mansion was not very good, she had no scruples at this time. After all, there were only her two personal maids here. She could say whatever she wanted, and her mean and vicious nature was undoubtedly revealed. Chuanyi and Chuanxi lowered their heads and treated themselves as two blocks of wood. They didn't dare to talk nonsense with her anymore. Both of them had been punished by Qi Tianyu before, so they didn't dare to talk to Chi Rongji casually. Seeing that the two maids were silent, Chi Rongji glared at them unhappily. She knew that it was her elder brother's order. She could only rely on her elder brother now, so she didn't dare to disobey her elder brother's order too much. She could only vent her anger on the maids and reach out to pinch the back of Chuanxi's hand hard. The pain made Chuanxi's face change dramatically, but she didn't dare to cry out in pain and could only kneel on the ground to beg for mercy. Putting down Chuanxi's hand, Chi Rongji bit the steamed bun hard, as if she wanted to bite off everything of Xiao Wanru. Suddenly, her teeth moved and she seemed to bite something. She reached out and pulled out a folded note. Chi Rongji froze for a moment and hurriedly unfolded it, ignoring the crumbs of the steamed bun on it. When she saw the words on it clearly, she was so angry and annoyed that she forgot her fear of Madame of Duke Xing. She patted the table hard and suddenly stood up. "Go and invite Madame of Duke Xing here and ask her what she means." Chapter 648. Miss. What's wrong? Chuanxi looked at Chi Rongji and said timidly. She really did not dare to offend Madame of Duke Xing. Madame of Duke Xing was in charge of the entire inner court of Duke Xing's mansion. Not to mention her, even the principal maid of old Madame was very respectful to Madame of Duke Xing. To put it nicely, Chi Rongji was her adopted daughter. To put it bluntly, Chi Rongji was just living under the roof of Madame of Duke Xing's mansion. How could she really be valued by the people in the mansion? Even the servants in the mansion treated her differently, not to mention that Chi Rongji had not been favored since she entered the mansion. Chi Rongji was like this, so how could her servant girls be competent? She had been bullied a lot in Duke Xing's mansion in the past 3 years, so she did not dare to make trouble for Madame of Duke Xing, It's so hateful. Actually let Wang Xingxue, the rascal, frame me. Qi Rongji was so angry that she unfolded the note in her hand again and looked at it. When she saw the words in front of her clearly, she only felt that her eyes hurt. She actually allowed her rascal nephew to seduce her. His words were frivolous and excessive, which made her feel disgusted. Thinking of Wang Xingxue, Qi Rongji felt like vomiting. She would not marry such a disgusting person even if she did not marry for the rest of her life. Miss, how do you know that Madame of Duke Xing asked him to write this? Chuanxi asked. It said that as long as I agree to Madame of Duke Xing's engagement with him, Madame of Duke Xing will release me. Otherwise, she will lock me up for the rest of my life. Let's see if she has the ability to do so. Qi Rongji sneered, tore the note in her hand into pieces, and said angrily. She also calmed down at this time, knowing that even if she sent someone to find Madame of Duke Xing, it would be useless. She was afraid that she could not even see Madame of Duke Xing, not to mention whether she could ask clearly or not. Miss, don't worry. First young master will help you. Maybe he has already made an agreement with Prince's mansion. At that time, they will directly send a sedan chair to carry you. No matter how powerful Duke Xing's mansion is, can it be more powerful than Prince's mansion? Chuni said. Her words calmed Qi Rongji down. She still believed in her elder brother. Who was Wang Xingxue? How dare he covet her? Didn't he look in the mirror to see what he was like? At this time, she had no appetite to eat, so she asked the two maids to clean up. She had thought that this matter was over. She did not expect that in the next few meals, he would pick up food at every meal. He even said that he would secretly come to see her after dusk. If the two of them succeeded, they would definitely get married immediately, and she could also be released from confinement. Moreover, he repeatedly frivolously and disgustingly said that he would treat her well. Qi Rongji was annoyed and anxious. At night, she didn't even dare to sleep alone. She kept her two maids by her side. But even so, she still occasionally heard people outside the courtyard. She couldn't make out anything in the dark, but she was sure that there were people's voices. After 2 days, Qi Rongji was almost exhausted. She didn't eat well during the day and couldn't sleep well at night. She would wake up the two maids at the slightest sound and look at the door in fear that Wang Xingxue would suddenly break in. If Wang Xingxue really succeeded, her life would be over. But in this courtyard, only the two maids she brought into the mansion were loyal to her. At this time, they were also confined together with her. Qi Rongji couldn't even send a message to Qi Tianyu outside. Looking at her gaunt face in the mirror, Qi Rongji angrily picked up the mirror in her hand and smashed it to the ground. The sharp and broken sound seemed to break Qi Rongji's calmness. She screamed shrilly and slapped Chuanxi, who was standing behind her. The slap made Chuanxi take 2 steps back. If it weren't for Chuanxi's support, she would have fallen on the ground covered with sharp broken lenses. Miss, don't be angry. We can find another way. Chuanxi supported Chuanxi and said, What else can we do? What else can we do? That bitch said that there would be a result in a few days, but my brother, he doesn't know yet. Qi Rongji said excitedly with tears on her face. She stamped on the ground several times hard, as if she were stepping on Wang Xingxue and Madame of Duke Xing. Actually, there is another way, but... Chuanxi looked at Qi Rongji hesitantly and seemed to want to say something but stopped on second thought. Obviously, she didn't know whether this way was good or bad. Say it. Qi Rongji wiped the tears on her face hard and said sternly. First young master is outside. Obviously, he doesn't know our predicament and can't help us, but we can ask others for help, for example, first young master. Chuanxi shivered under Qi Rongji's fierce gaze, and her eyes drifted. First young master Xiaohua? Qi Rongji froze for a moment, sat down slowly, and frowned tightly. Chuanxi didn't finish her words, but Qi Rongji understood what she meant immediately. It was because after Qi Rongji entered the mansion for the first time, she found that everyone in the mansion didn't like her and completely ignored her existence. Madame of Duke Xing almost never saw Madame of Duke Xing's mansion after pretending to be her relative with her that day. Madame of Duke Xing even sent someone to tell her that she didn't need to pay respects to her. Occasionally, when she saw her on the road, she didn't say a word and rarely paid attention to her. Old Madame of Duke Xing's mansion was not someone she could meet and please whenever she wanted. Although Xiao Yanru asked her to follow her from time to time, it seemed that Xiao Yanru let a servant girl follow her, and she couldn't decide anything. However, it seemed that Xiao Yanru treated her kindly. Everyone thought that First Miss was kind and cared for her, a goddaughter, who was disliked by Madame. But in fact, she was just at Xiao Yanru's beck and call. However, if she didn't follow Xiao Yanru, her life in Duke Xing's mansion would be more difficult. Everyone was unfriendly, and even the servant girls and old maids dared to challenge her. Only the first young master of Duke Xing's mansion treated her well. When he saw her, he would always stop and say a few words to her gently. Xiaohua, and was the only person she could hold on to. Of course, Qi Rongji would not let him go. Every time she saw Xiaohua, she would act very gentle, even delicate and pitiful. Her appearance and behavior were all in line with the temperament of a lady from a respectable family. Her appearance was already outstanding, and coupled with her delicate behavior, Xiaohua admired her a lot. Qi Rongji even saw in Xiaohua's eyes the same way Dian looked at her at that time, which meant that Xiaohua was interested in her. No, I'm going to marry into the prince's mansion. I can't have anything to do with Xiaohua. Qi Rongji thought for a while and shook her head. Miss, we don't want to do anything. We just want the first young master to do us a favor. Chuanxi said. Yes, miss, you can ask the first young master to stop Child Wang or threaten him. You can do it in private and don't need to tell Madam. As long as Child Wang doesn't make any trouble, we can wait for the news from the first young master peacefully. Chuanxi also said. Hearing what the two maids said, Qi Rongji thought for a while and nodded. In the whole mansion, only Xiaohua was kind to her, and he was the only one who could help her at this time. Grind the ink. Miss, First Miss Qi has sent the note to the first young master Xiao. When Qing entered the room and reported to Xiao Wanru was standing under the window and painting. It was a painting of a lady. The lady in the painting only showed half of her face, and behind her was a fiery maple forest. The maple leaves were like fire. The lady in a light 8-piece dress stepped on the fiery red leaves. Although only a small part of her face was shown, she still looked stunning and beautiful. What did Xiao Huan do? Xiao Wanru put down the writing brush in her hand and looked at her unfinished painting. In fact, she was not very satisfied with it. In her last life, after she entered the Imperial Palace, she was famous for her painting of ladies. She would paint the most beautiful side of the beauties so that they could be sent to the palace for selection. Different angles and different sceneries would present a completely different picture. The first young master took a few people to stop Wang Shengxue, who was entering the mansion, dragged him aside and beat him. He also warned him not to be presumptuous in the mansion. Otherwise, he would be driven out of the mansion. Qing said and then told her what had happened in detail. The first young master beat Wang Shengxue secretly without being found out and also expressed his intention. His means were not ordinary. Xiao Wanru showed a meaningful smile on her face. She had met the first young master Xiao several times. Every time she met him, he looked very gentle and treated her the same as his biological sister. He seemed to be selfless. They had never met each other in private, let alone talk to each other, so she really didn't know his temperament. But after this incident, she could tell that Xiao Hua was not so easy to deal with, and he was the one who would take Hao's position as the heir of Duke Xing's mansion. Compared with Xiao Hua, the first young master, should be the heir of Duke Xing's mansion that everyone expected. In the last life, Xiao Wanru had met Xiao Hua in Xiao Yanru's place. On that day, Xiao Yanru asked her to kneel at the door as a punishment. When Xiao Hua entered the door, he glanced at her and asked her who she was. After knowing who she was, the heir of Duke Xing's mansion, who looked gentle and elegant, showed a trace of contempt on his face. He looked at her condescendingly and said, "You are really a bitch who doesn't know the rules." The kneel. He was filled with disgust towards her, a woman whom he had just met. Of course, it was not only because of her name. Needless to say, this first young master Xiao also knew her real identity, so he had a deep hatred for her. Once he knew it was her, he could not help but mock her. In her last life, she didn't know anything and didn't understand why she had provoked the heir of Duke Xing's mansion, who was said to be an elegant child. However, it turned out that the entire second branch of Duke Xing's mansion had the intention to kill her branch. In this life, she would tear off the mask of the entire second branch and let everyone see their true colors. What they owed her and how her in the last life would eventually be paid back. It was better to take action while Qi Rongji was here. Chapter 649. Xiao Hua, and didn't directly mention what had happened to Qi Rongji, which showed that he was cautious. It was obvious that the first young master Xiao was not easy to deal with. The reason he gave was that Wang Xingxue molested several servant girls in the mansion, and the servant girls reported it to Madame of Duke Xing, so he taught him a lesson on behalf of Madame of Duke Xing. It seemed that this matter had nothing to do with Qi Rongji, nor was it related to his reputation. From this point, it could be seen that the first young master Xiao had always had a good reputation outside, which showed that it was not a coincidence. Continue to send notes to Qi Rongji. Bing Qianyu said coldly, with deep eyes. Yes, I got it. In the next few days, Qi Rongji found that she not only failed to avoid Wang Xingxue's pestering, but also became worse. At night, she could even hear someone calling her from the top of the wall, which made her and her two servant girls tremble with fear. After another 2 days, Qi Rongji secretly bribed the 2 old maids guarding the door again and asked them to send letters to Xiaohua. When Qi Rongji's letter was sent last time, Xiaohua and asked someone to reward them. This time, without any hesitation, he sent the message again. Madame said that she would keep Miss Qi and prevent her and her servant girls from going outside, but she didn't mention that the first young master was among the people outside. The first young master was Madame's only son and the future master of the mansion. As servants, they dared not offend the first young master. Although the first young master didn't say anything before, it could be seen that he agreed from the fact that he rewarded them. Since there was one, there would be another. This time, the 2 old maids were rewarded by Xiao Huan again. Then he beat Wang Xingxue with an excuse, warning him not to be presumptuous in the mansion, let alone to have sex with the women in the mansion. Otherwise, he would definitely drive him and his sister out of the mansion. Wang Yishu was raised in Duke Xing's mansion and kept alive with medicine. If it weren't for these medicines, she might have died long ago. If she was really driven out, not only Wang Xingxue couldn't make ends meet, but also Wang Yishu would lose her life. Wang Xingxue, who was almost limping because of the pain, gritted his teeth in anger, but he had to promise that there was no such thing. He would not do such a shameless thing, and he almost swore to heaven and earth. After Wang Xingxue limped away, Xiao Huan left with a frown. Eldest young master, why are you always beating young master Wang? Could it be that young master Wang has offended eldest young master? Separated by a wall, he suddenly heard a maid's voice coming from the other side of the wall. Judging from the voice, it was obvious that she had seen the scene just now. Touching his waist, Wang Xingxue stopped and listened attentively. He had been beaten for no reason, so how could he not hate it? Of course, he hated the servant girls in Duke Xing's mansion the most. He didn't know who had spoken ill of him in front of Xiaohua. In fact, he was very well behaved in Duke Xing's mansion and didn't dare to flirt with the servant girls in the mansion. How could Wang Gongzi have offended the eldest Gongzi? The disapproving voice of another servant girl made Wang Xingxue nod repeatedly. Until now, he had not figured out what he had done wrong. If he knew which servant girl had secretly said those greedy words, he would find a way to kill her when he got back. If he didn't offend the eldest Gongzi, how could the eldest Gongzi avenge the servant girl? The eldest Gongzi has never cared about the affairs of the inner courtyard. Moreover, Child Wang is the eldest Gongzi's cousin. How could he have beaten his cousin for a servant girl? The former servant girl said in confusion. In fact, this was also Wang Xingxue's question. When he saw this cousin in the past, he had always been very respectful and never treated him coldly, and the people around him had always been respectful. Wang Xingxue was not stupid, otherwise he wouldn't have passed the examination. The first time was an accident, but the second time was not the same. He didn't offend the eldest Gongzi. He offended the eldest Gongzi's favorite girl. Another servant girl sneered. Which girl is it? Wang Xingxue also strained his ears. If he knew which bitch told on him, he would teach that bitch a lesson. This time, she beat him even harder than the last time. He was beaten so hard that he couldn't move his legs for a while. She's not a servant girl. If the eldest Gongzi really cares about a servant girl, he can just ask her to come to his room. How could Madame not allow the eldest Gongzi to ask for a servant girl? I saw the old maid guarding that yard send a letter to the eldest Gongzi the other day. The servant girl's voice was a little sharp, but it was not high. At first glance, one could tell that she was a person who liked to gossip and had a short mouth. But often, the truth from the mouth of this kind of gossip was more believable. Which yard is that? It's over there. Isn't it locked up? Madame wants her to marry Child Wang. The eldest Gongzi is distressed. But really, she's so beautiful. How could she agree to marry Child Wang? What a sin. The servant girl's voice was getting farther and farther away. Obviously, she had gone down another road. Wang Xingxue stood still by the wall. His face turned blue and white, and his expression became gloomy. He knew who the two servant girls were talking about. It was obviously Qi Rongji. He used to visit Duke Xing's mansion, so he had certainly seen Qi Rongji. Although Qi Rongji was beautiful, Wang Xingxue had always disliked her. He inexplicably felt that this woman was not a good person. In front of other people in the mansion, she was as humble as a servant, but when facing him, she seemed to be superior, which was really unlikable. Unexpectedly, this time Madame of Duke Xing called him over and said that she wanted him to marry Qi Rongji. Qi Rongji's elder brother was quite capable. Although Wang Xingxue had no idea about Qi Rongji and even hated her, he naturally agreed since Madame of Duke Xing asked him. If he could please Madame of Duke Xing, he would never hesitate. Moreover, although Qi Rongji could not win his heart, he was clear about his current situation. He was afraid that those good misses from aristocratic families would not marry him as his legal wife. It would be good if he could marry one. At least Qi Rongji had a promising elder brother behind her. Although Magistrate Qi was far away in Jiangzhou, it was said that he also loved his daughter. This matter was settled for the time being. However, Madame of Duke Xing was very happy and said that after a period of time, they would be officially engaged. Unexpectedly, before this matter was brought up, Xiaohua could not bear it anymore. He even found an excuse to beat him twice for that woman. He could not swallow this grievance. She turned around and limped angrily to Madame of Duke Xing's courtyard. It was Madame of Duke Xing who had arranged this for her, not the bitch she had taken a fancy to. A trace of malice flashed across her eyes. How could a bitch, who was in foster care and had tarnished Xiao Yanru's reputation, plot against her? Did she really think that she was a treasure? He did not believe that Madame of Duke Xing would not be angry if she knew that this bitch secretly seduced her son. Miss Qi's courtyard was smashed. When Yu Jie came in, panting, Xiao Wanru was sorting out her set of acupuncture. She picked up a thin needle and gently rubbed it with a snow-white handkerchief. It was expected that Qi Rongji was in a mess. Madame of Duke Xing attached so much importance to Xiaohua, so how could she allow Qi Rongji to ruin his reputation? She even did not allow him to have any flaws. Hearing Wang Xingxue's words, Madame of Duke Xing was furious. If such a thing happened in her previous life, Madame of Duke Xing might think about it more and would not immediately lose her temper and ask someone to smash Qi Rongji's courtyard. But this life was different. Duke Xing's mansion looked good on the surface, but many things could not stand up to scrutiny. Madame of Duke Xing was the most outstanding pair of children, which made her proud. But now they were outstanding one after another, and her reputation was ruined. Madame of Duke Xing was very anxious and uneasy. Did you go to First Young Master's courtyard? The thin and long needle flashed in the light coming in through the window, with some scorching light. Yes, Madame went there angrily. I heard that she drove everyone out and came out not long after. After coming out, Madame looked much better and went to Miss Wang's courtyard. First Young Master went out after Madame left, so I couldn't see his face. Yujie reported in detail and admired her miss more and more. Her miss guessed almost right and even guessed Madame of Duke Xing's reaction. Went to Wang Yishu's courtyard? Xiao Wenru put down the needle in her hand, slightly glanced at her watery eyes, and said thoughtfully. It seemed that Wang Yishu was going to take the blame again this time. Yes, she went to Miss Wang's courtyard. I heard Madame of Duke Xing ask 2 maids to go to the kitchen to get some pastries that Miss Wang likes and ask them to be light. She said that Miss Wang has been suffering from relapses recently and her spleen and stomach are not good, so she is a little angry. Yu Jie, who also knew medical skills, curled her lips after saying that. Wang Yishu was so sick now that she couldn't get out of bed. She complained that she had a bad temper and her body was unstable. Besides, her spleen and stomach were not good. Now she had to eat according to her illness and nothing else was a big deal. Yu Jie, you have followed Mingqiu for so many years. Do you think Wang Yishu is really sick now or because of other reasons? Xiao Wenru slightly raised the corners of her mouth, fluttered her long eyelashes twice and asked. How could she be so sick? It's obvious that it's fake at first glance. At that time, she just fainted a little. How could she be sick for so many years and still can't get up? It's obvious that she made it up to avoid what happened in the Imperial Palace at that time. Yu Jie said with certainty. Others didn't know what had happened at that time, but she knew it very well. It was obviously Wang Yishu who panicked and became like this. For this reason, this matter had become a headless case. Even though everyone suspected Madame of Duke Xing, because there was no evidence of Wang Yishu. It was because of the book that this matter remained unsolved. Then why do you think Wang Yishu has been recuperating for so many years and doesn't show up in front of others? If she continues to pretend to be sick for so many years, she will really be sick for the rest of her life. Isn't Wang Yishu anxious? Xiao Wenru said thoughtfully. It was possible for Wang Yishu to pretend to be sick for 1 or 2 days or even for a month. But she had never seen anyone who pretended to be sick for 3 years. There must be some mystery in it. Chapter 650. Miss, do you mean that Wang Yishu is not pretending, and it must be true, that she can't die and can only lie in bed? After Yu Jie repeated the words several times, her face suddenly changed. Miss Wang has been drugged and can't get up? If it was a fake disease, then it must have been drugged. Xiao Wenru nodded. Wang Yishu probably didn't want her to be delayed like this, but she couldn't make the decision now, so she had been lying in bed for 3 years. Seeing Xiao Wenru nod, Yu Jie thought of another question and said, Miss, since Miss Wang's existence may be harmful to Madame of Duke Xing, why don't you directly kill her? Anyway, she has been drugged. Wouldn't it be better to end it once and for all? The existence of Wang Yishu was a hidden danger for Madame of Duke Xing. The best way was to kill Wang Yishu. Wang Yishu can't die. If she really dies, people will definitely suspect Madame of Duke Xing more. At that time, everyone thought that it was Madame of Duke Xing who intended to deal with me. If something happened to Wang Yishu as soon as she returned to the mansion, Madame of Duke Xing would definitely take the blame. Moreover, I have returned to the family. Xiao Wenru looked at Yu Jie meaningfully and said. Yu Jie was scared by her words, but after thinking about it carefully, she still felt that what her master said was reasonable. In the past, when her master was the second miss of Qin's mansion, others might think that Duke Xing's mansion would not frame up her master because the two families had nothing to do with each other. But now her master was the 5th miss of Xiao's mansion. She was the only daughter of the former heir of Duke Xing in the world. It was normal for them to fight openly and secretly for the relationship between the second branch of Duke Xing's mansion. If Madame of Duke Xing had known Xiao Wenru's identity, it was very likely that she wanted to get rid of Xiao Wenru before she returned to the family. Then, the implications of this matter would be huge. Not only was Madame of Duke Xing vicious, but also the second branch of Duke Xing's mansion was suspected of plotting to murder the first branch of Duke Xing's mansion. If and Great Elder Princess got hold of it, it would not be settled by the position of heir of Duke Xing. In this regard, Duke Xing's mansion could not be radical. She has to live for a few more years before she dies, so that no one will associate her with Madame of Duke Xing. After a long time, no one will care about Wang Yishu anymore. Xiao Wanru continued. Her voice was very calm, and there was even a faint smile on her delicate little face. However, this smile was terrifying, as if there was something cold gathering in her eyes, so deep that the bottom could not be seen. Look into Wang Yishu. Miss, it's not easy to get close to Miss Wang. That place is very remote and no one goes there in the past. If this servant goes there, it will definitely be an eyesore. Moreover, Miss Wang and Miss have a grudge. If this servant goes there openly and something happens, they can blame it on you. Yu Jie still had her concerns. She felt that it was inappropriate to do this. According to her Miss, Madame of Duke Xing had treated her Miss very early. She was very afraid of Wang Yishu and didn't have any good intentions toward her. If there was a chance, she would definitely kill two birds with one stone and push her master to the opposite side who murdered Wang Yishu. Old grudges would also be brought up. If her Miss killed a dying patient because of old grudges, she would be despised by the people in the world. Ask Qing to look into it. You don't have to go there, but you can occasionally show up nearby. You don't have to get too close. Just watch from a distance. If you do it too often, she will be anxious. Xiao Wanru was amused by Yu Jie's anxious words. She picked up another needle, faced it against the light and carefully rubbed it. If Madame of Duke Xing saw it a few more times, she would definitely be nervous. If she was nervous, there would always be some trouble. Qing still had helpers by her side, so she could naturally appear and disappear unpredictably. Qing found out the news very quickly. By the next day, she had found something very detailed. The dregs of medicine and food obtained from Wang Yishu, as well as Wang Yishu's appearance, all showed that Wang Yishu was in a very bad condition at the moment. If it continued to be like this, Wang Yishu might really die. Miss, the medicine is actually a common tonic medicine. It's not used to treat any disease. It's just for treatment. I don't have anything else in it, and there's nothing in the food. It's just some ordinary things. Yu Jie checked the results and reported after washing her hands in the warm water. Everything seemed to be normal, as if Duke Xing's mansion really wanted to save Wang Yishu. However, it was actually useless for a patient to only take some ordinary tonic medicine without taking the right medicine. Miss Wang Yishu seems to be really sick. Miss Wang Yishu seems to be really sick. I've seen her face. She looks very old. Her hair is yellow, and there are some fine wrinkles on her forehead. It can be seen that she has been living a hard life and is in poor health. There are 2 dark circles under her eyes. I didn't fall asleep until I saw the doctor inserting the needles into her body. During the rest of the time, she has been too weak to get out of bed or fall asleep. She is very bad-tempered. Qing reported what she had seen to Xiao Wanru. She was not a doctor, so she didn't know what disease Wang Yishu was suffering from. However, judging from Wang Yishu's appearance, she seemed to be seriously ill indeed. Miss, if she has been poisoned, where did the poison come from? Moreover, she has been poisoned for 3 years, so it doesn't seem to be a poison. Yu Jie, who was very adventurous about this kind of thing, said to Xiao Wanru in a low voice. It doesn't seem to be an ordinary poison. It should be non-toxic, but it can make people weak and sick. There are many medicinal herbs that can reinforce or counteract each other. Xiao Wanru said. Connecting the dots, she was now sure that there must be some medicinal herbs that could reinforce or counteract each other. Ordinary poisoning could easily be exposed. Even if Wang Xingxue didn't investigate anything at that time and directly buried Wang Yishu, if someone reversed the case many years later, the bones found would be different from those of ordinary people, which could easily ruin things. If someone stirred up trouble and investigated Wang Yishu's death at that time, it would be more likely for something to go wrong. Of course, these were still not enough. Miss, what medicinal herbs do you think they are? Yu Jie couldn't figure it out, so she asked with a frown. After all, Yu Jie was not a famous doctor, so she had never handled some medicinal herbs. Although Xiao Wanru knew acupuncture, she was not as good at medicinal herbs as Yu Jie. Xiao Wanru couldn't think of it at the moment. She picked up the medical book at hand and flipped through it, gently bit her cherry lip, and then asked Qing, where did the doctor come from? It is said that his ancestor is an imperial physician in the Imperial Palace with good medical skills. He has been treating Miss Wang for so many years. Madam of Duke Xing invited him with a lot of money. He was not originally from this area. After he was invited, he specially treated Miss Wang. Now he lives in the mansion and gives acupuncture to Miss Wang twice a day. Qing said in detail. Xiao Wanru suddenly had an idea. She suddenly stood up with her hands on the table and said, "Acupuncture? Acupuncture." Hearing Xiao Wanru's words, Yu Jie immediately realized something and looked at Xiao Wanru with her eyes wide open in horror. Xiao Wanru nodded silently. Both she and Yu Jie had learned acupuncture from Mingqiu Nun, but neither of them could compare with Mingqiu Nun. Although they had some guesses, they couldn't get the right answer. It seemed that she should go to Mingqiu Nun to confirm it. Now that she had an idea in her mind, Xiao Wanru calmed down. She couldn't find out anything about this matter for the time being, so she put it aside and changed the topic. Did Wang Yishu take the blame for what happened to Qi Rongji? That's the rumor in the mansion. It said that Miss Qi annoyed Wang Yishu because she was in a bad mood. Therefore, Miss Wang sent a few people over and smashed everything in Miss Qi's room. Yu Jie said. In fact, there was no need to inquire about it. Today, the whole mansion was talking about it with eyes and noses, as if they had seen Wang Yishu send someone to smash Qi Rongji's room. A half-dead person actually had the energy to get angry and send someone to smash Qi Rongji's room. It sounded really inexplicable that Wang Yishu took the blame. She is so ill that even her voice is very low and almost can't be heard, but she still sent someone to smash Qi Rongji's room. Madam of Duke Xing is really good at shifting the blame to others. Qing raised the corner of her mouth sarcastically. She went to keep an eye on Wang Yishu, so she could see clearly that Wang Yishu didn't seem to be able to fight with others in her current condition. Where's Wang Xingxue? When he's free, he comes to the mansion in the name of his sister and visits old Madam and Madam of Duke Xing the most. Yu Jie said disdainfully. At first glance, she could tell that Wang Xingxue didn't care much about his sister at all. When you're free, you'd better go to Wang Yishu's room. If someone comes, you can leave. Even if no one comes, you should leave cleverly. Xiao Wanru told her. Miss, don't worry. I know. Yu Jie understood and said. Miss, old madam sent someone to invite you over. While the master and the servant were talking, a maid outside the room reported to Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru glanced at Yu Jie, who understood and turned out of the room. She saw a little maid standing in the corridor, facing the door with a smile. Seeing Xiao Wanru lift the curtain and come out, the maid smiled more brightly. What's the matter with old madam? Yu Jie looked the little maid up and down and asked. I don't know. Maybe old madam misses the fifth miss and wants to ask about the fifth miss's physical condition. The little maid gave a watertight answer. You go back first. My miss will come over after tidying up a little. Seeing that she couldn't get anything out of her, Yu Jie said. Yes, I'll go to report it to old madam now. The little maid said with a smile. After bowing sideways to Yu Jie, she turned around and left. After the maid left, Yu Jie entered the room. Xiao Wanru was sitting in front of the dressing table. Chu Lu helped her comb her hair into a simple bun and picked a simple hairpin to put in Xiao Wanru's hair. Take this one. Xiao Wanru shook her head, took out another hairpin from her jewelry box and handed it to Yu Jie. Miss, this one was given by the Empress Dowager that day. Chu Lu took the hairpin, looked at it and reminded her. Although it was also a simple hairpin, its material was extremely gorgeous, which was not an ordinary hairpin. Let's take this one. Xiao Wanru said with a slight smile. There was a trace of sarcasm on the pretty girl's face in the mirror. Old madam deducted most of the Empress Dowager's reward, and there must be a reason. Considering the time, it was time for her to go there. The reward from the Imperial Palace was given to her by name. Even old madam couldn't deduct so much at will. Yu Jie, go to Wang Yishu's place and keep an eye on her. If you see the doctor who is doing acupuncture for Wang Yishu, try to find a way to find out the truth. Qing, go to Qi Rongji's place and keep an eye on her. I'll take Chu Lu to old madam. Chapter 651. Remember in 1 second, 800 $say, net. This is a wonderful free reading without a pop-up window. Every time she walked into old Madam's room, Xiao Wanru always felt depressed, which was a very repulsive atmosphere. When she entered the door, old Madam had been sitting on the chair with a straight face and a domineering look. It was the feeling at the moment. Before she entered the door, she heard people talking and laughing inside, and the atmosphere seemed to be very good. When she heard the servant girl report that she had come, the whole room was strangely quiet for a while. Then she heard old Madam's low voice asking her to come in. It was a feeling of being completely excluded. Although she didn't say it clearly, the whole atmosphere was incompatible with her. Thinking that her mother had also experienced such a situation, a trace of sharpness and deepness flashed across her eyes. In Duke Xing's mansion, old Madam of Duke Xing's mansion had a high status and could trample anyone under her feet. Madam of Duke Xing was adding fuel to the fire. If she had not been forced, her mother would not have left Duke Xing's mansion. After bowing to old Madam, who was sitting on the couch in the middle, Xiao Wanru retreated to one side and sat down. When she looked up, she found that not only Xiao Yanru, but also Xiao Jie, Xiao Zaihuan and Xiao Kaling were here. It was really lively. Seeing her raise her eyes, Xiao Yanru smiled at her with a bit of gentleness and dignity as usual. Xiao Jie looked at her with a bit of disdain. If it weren't for R and great elder princess behind Xiao Yanru's status in the mansion was even lower than hers. How could she fall in love with Xiao Yanru? Xiao Huan and Xiao Kaling were the biological sisters of the third branch. Because the third madam had a car accident 3 years ago, she was always in poor health. The two sisters usually accompanied the third madam in the third branch and rarely appeared in other places. They lived in seclusion. Xiao Zaihuan looked more mature. After meeting Xiao Wanru's eyes calmly, she was expressionless. Xiao Kaling was a little curious and followed Xiao Wanru's gaze for a while. Now everyone was here. Madame Dowager coughed in a low voice and said to her 5 granddaughters, "Since all of you are here, let's talk about it together. Wanru is the latest. Ru, tell her about it." After saying that, she picked up the teacup at hand, took a sip, and put the blame on Xiao Yanru. Xiao Yanru was sitting beside Xiao Wanru. Hearing old Madam's words, she turned her head and said, "Fifth sister, do you know honored consort Shu in the Imperial Palace?" Empress Shu? Xiao Wanru thought for a moment and nodded. Consort Shu was one of the 4 concubines of the emperor, but she didn't give birth to any children. Even so, she still sat firmly in the position of consort Shu. It could be seen that she was extraordinary. Honored consort Shu and my mother are cousins. In the past, when they were not married, they had a close relationship. Now that they have entered the palace, they often send gifts over. Honored consort Shu sent gifts over yesterday. Take your share back. Grandmother wants us to go to the palace and thank honored consort Shu together. Xiao Yanru said with a smile. I'm still in mourning. I'm afraid it's inconvenient for me. Xiao Wanru narrowed her eyes and said with a slight smile. It doesn't matter. Honored consort Shu has already known about you. Knowing that you saved Prince Qin, she is very curious about you and especially told grandmother that she wants to meet you. Xiao Yanru said with a smile. But I'm dressed so simply. I'm afraid that I will offend honored consort Shu. Xiao Wanru lowered her head and hid the trace of coldness in her eyes. Honored consort Shu was actually Madam of Duke Xing's backer. What did she neglect? Honored consort Shu has a good temper. Since she says that she wants to meet you, she won't think that you offend her. Xiao Yanru persuaded with a smile. Well, Wanru, you don't have to refuse. It's naturally your blessing that honored consort Shu wants to meet you. Don't refuse too much. Tomorrow, you will go to the Imperial Palace to meet honored consort Shu. I have already handed the invitation card in. Old Madam said. Since honored consort Shu wanted to see Xiao Wanru and had already sent an invitation card, it had been decided. Therefore, Xiao Wanru was not asked to come to discuss it with Xiao Wanru. She just wanted to inform Xiao Wanru, which meant that Xiao Wanru had to agree whether she agreed or not. Xiao Wanru raised her head, rolled her watery eyes, and said with a leisurely smile, elegant and gentle, Yes, It's all up to you, grandmother. Seeing that she no longer refused, old madam's face became a little better. Since you have entered the Imperial Palace, you can't always wear such ordinary clothes. Choose what you need. After old madam finished speaking, Nanny Yu had already come in with a few maids. They lined up in a row, each with a tray in their hands. The jewelry and brocades on the trays were obviously not ordinary at first glance. Xiao Wanru calmly withdrew her gaze. So these were the rewards given to her by the Empress Dowager in the Imperial Palace. Now she took them out for her to choose, and the leftovers were naturally left for others. At present, she was observing mourning for her parents and cultivating in seclusion, so how could she choose more, let alone choose exquisite jewelry and brocades? The so-called letting her choose first was actually a formality, so that when she talked about this matter in the future, she would be speechless and be in the right. She raised the corner of her mouth slightly and thought that there were not so many things in this world. The Empress Dowager wanted to take advantage of her and let her suffer in silence. Moreover, the most important thing was that old madam had not yet made it clear that these were the rewards given to her by the Empress Dowager. In addition, she mentioned Honored Consort Shu just now and said that Honored Consort Shu sent gifts, which was easy to make others think that these were also given by Honored Consort Shu. Even if she said that she didn't know that these were the rewards given to her by the Empress Dowager in the future, others would think that she deliberately made trouble. It turned out that she deliberately made her misunderstand. Old madam's scheme was really good. Grandmother, there's no need. I am still cultivating in seclusion, so I dare not accept your rewards. Xiao Wanru stood up and refused with a smile when she saw several servant girls standing in front of her in a row, seemingly allowing her to choose. How can you not choose? Even if you are cultivating in seclusion now, you have to choose a few pieces. Don't let me down. Xiao Yinru also stood up and said with a smile. If Xiao Wanru didn't choose, none of them could choose, lest the Empress Dowager asked about it and blamed Duke Xing's mansion. Half of these were promised to her by her grandmother, and it was indeed the time when she needed exquisite jewelry most recently. How could she not be tempted? No, thank you, grandmother. Xiao Wanru shook her head and said firmly. Old madam's face darkened, and she couldn't keep the fake smile on her face anymore. She squinted at Xiao Wanru coldly and said, Originally, I wanted to let your sisters choose first, but considering that you are the youngest and lack of jewelry in the past, they all let you choose first. If you don't choose, not only will you waste their kindness, but also make my previous words not count. Maybe someone will say that I am partial. Thinking of all kinds of rumors outside, after 3 years, she thought that they had gradually faded away. Unexpectedly, they not only did not fade away, but also showed a trend of rising recently. All of this was because of Xiao Wanru, her cheap granddaughter. Old madam's eyes were not eyes, and her eyebrows were not eyebrows. Grandma, you are Wanru's elder. You don't have to care about what outsiders say. No one will take it seriously. Grandma, you'd better let the 4 sisters choose. I won't. Xiao Wanru didn't seem to see old madam's gloomy face. She reached out to point at the hairpin on her head and said, The hairpin on Wanru's head is also good. It was given by the Empress Dowager. If I wear this hairpin to the Imperial Palace to meet Honored Consort Shu, the Empress Dowager will not blame me. Xiao Yinru's eyes fell on the hairpin on Xiao Wanru's black hair. Hearing what she said, she found that the hairpin was really valuable. Although it looked plain, its jade color was excellent. If one looked carefully, one could see the clear inner substance inside. It was really extraordinary. It could be seen that it was indeed a high-quality hairpin. 5th sister, the hairpin on your head is really good, but it's a little short. Choose another hairpin. It's a gift from me. Xiao Yinru reached out to point at the gifts on the tray in front of Xiao Wanru with a smile. Xiao Wanru only needed to pick some out of courtesy, and she could choose the rest carefully. She had asked Xiao Wanru to come here just for show, because she knew that Xiao Wanru would not choose many. 5th sister, what do you think of this one? Xiao Yinru reached out to pick up a hairpin similar to the one on Xiao Wanru's head, handed it to Xiao Wanru with a smile, and said, Look, it looks like a pear. If you like this kind of plain hairpin, you can choose this one. How about this one? Xiao Wanru's eyes fell on the pair of hairpins Xiao Yinru had chosen for her. She looked at it for a while and seemed to find something. She tilted her head slightly and asked with curiosity in her watery eyes, "Is this hairpin also given by the Imperial Palace? It's really similar to the one on my head, and even the mark is so similar. It seems that it was given by the same owner. Could it be that honored consort Shu also got it from the Empress Dowager?" Her words were very abrupt, and no one expected that she would really ask such a question at this time. However, her words were extremely natural. It was Xiao Yinru who brought it up. This hairpin was indeed similar to the one on Xiao Wanru's head, and they were both given by the Empress Dowager, so it was normal for them to have the same mark. Old Madam's face was as dark as water, and she stared at Xiao Wanru gloomily. Her words had ruined the situation she had carefully created before. The room became strangely quiet. The scattered voices seemed to be interrupted by a slap, and it was so quiet that everyone's breathing in the room could almost be heard. Xiao Jie held the handkerchief in her hand and glared at Xiao Wanru angrily. She had waited here for a long time because she planned to pick a few good ones after Xiao Wanru finished picking. Xiao Taihuan and Xiao Kaling did not say a word. They looked at each other and waited quietly for the following scene. Was old Madam going to scold Xiao Wanru in anger, or was she going to pretend that she did not hear it and let it pass? It could be imagined that old Madam would not be in a good mood no matter what. Based on their mother's repeated advice, the two sisters did not have a good impression of their grandmother. At this time, they did not say anything and just watched coldly. Chapter 652. Remember in 1 second, 800 male signs /say net, fifth sister, these are all bestowed by the Imperial Palace, so they are naturally similar. Fifth sister, these are all bestowed by the Imperial Palace, so they are naturally similar. Xiao Yinru reacted quickly and was the first to react. She hurriedly put down the hairpin in her hand with a smile and picked up another gorgeous hairpin. Strings of beads fell from the hairpin, and there were small gold beads hanging on the pendant. When the pendant shook slightly, it was already dazzling. They were very gorgeous. With her sharp eyes, Xiao Wanru saw that there was a small phoenix under the largest golden bead. Her watery eyes involuntarily deepened. If she remembered correctly, this kind of phoenix could not be worn by everyone. Even though there might be such a phoenix pattern in the jewelry bestowed by the Imperial Palace, only a person with a title could wear it. Her eyes fell on the tray in front of her, which was full of 8 hairpins, some of which were plain and some of which were gorgeous. But no matter if they were plain or gorgeous, they all seemed to be valuable. She looked at the other trays around her and found that although there were some jewelry, they didn't seem to be as valuable as this one. But similarly, the jewelry on the other trays around her were all in good order, without any violation of regulations. There were a total of 8 hairpins in the plate in front of her, and half of them were illegal. If she randomly picked, half of them might be illegal. Big sister, this is very beautiful. You look beautiful wearing it. Xiao Wanru reached out to take the hairpin, but she didn't put it on herself. Instead, she put it on Xiao Yinru's black hair with a gentle smile. Xiao Yinru hurriedly reached out to pull out the hairpin from her hair, put it on the tray with a smile, and refused. How can I choose first, sister? You haven't chosen yet. Big sister, you'd better choose first. How can I be the first to choose the gifts sent by honored consort Shu? It's reasonable for you to choose first. I've received a lot of rewards from the Empress Dowager. Xiao Wanru still said with a smile, as if she didn't see the displeasure flashing across Xiao Yinru's eyes. Except for Xiao Wanru, who came in last, everyone knew that this was originally a reward from the Empress Dowager. Many people looked at Old Madam. Old Madam's face turned livid in an instant, and she almost couldn't help pounding the table. In Duke Xing's mansion, no one had ever humiliated her like this. But she also knew that this was not the time to get angry, so she suppressed her anger and said slowly, "Just pick. Big sis, you pick first." Xiao Wanru took a step back, turned to Xiao Yinru, and said with a smile, giving the seat to Xiao Yinru, who was standing beside her. "Fifth sister, you first." Xiao Yinru looked at Xiao Wanru and said. At this time, She had to suspect that Xiao Wanru knew something and came here to make trouble. However, Xiao Wanru did it so naturally and brought up the topic with the hairpin. If it weren't for the hairpin that brought up the topic, she would definitely suspect that Xiao Wanru had already communicated with someone. Big sis, you pick first. I'm the youngest. It'll be my turn after the other sisters pick. Honored consort Shu gave them to you for the sake of Big Sis, so it's normal for her to give all of them to you. Since Big Sis is so considerate of us, how can we grab them first? Xiao Wanru's smile became more and more intimate, but her words made Xiao Yinru's face turn livid and pale. There were not only Xiao Wanru present, but also several other sisters. The sisters of the third branch, whom she looked down upon in the past, looked at her with a faint smile, and their eyes were full of mockery. This made Xiao Yinru feel embarrassed. No matter how scheming she was, she blushed at this time. She clenched her handkerchief tightly with her fingers and suppressed her impulse to slap Xiao Wanru. Impulse. Xiao Wanru's words almost gave her a hard slap in the face in front of everyone. However, Xiao Yinru looked so innocent that she didn't know anything. Even if she wanted to get angry, she couldn't do it. These are not given by honored consort Shu, but by the Empress Dowager. You're cultivating in seclusion now, so you can't wear two gorgeous things. I'll let you pick first and then distribute them to your other sisters. When you're out of mourning in the future, I'll compensate you. Old Madam had to suppress her anxiety and said, she had to say something. If she didn't, she would lose face. In the room, only Xiao Wanru and her maid didn't know it. In the eyes of those who knew it, if Old Madam didn't say anything, she couldn't say anything dignified and righteous in the future. It turns out to be given by the Empress Dowager. Xiao Wanru muttered to herself in a low voice with a surprised look, as if she really didn't know it. Then she raised her face with a smile and said generously, Grandma has sent some of them here before. Let's give them to you. Since they are given to you, you should pick first. Old Madam said in a deep voice with no joy on her face. She was forced to be like being slapped in the face, so it would be strange for her to be happy. Yes, Big Sister, please pick one for me. Big Sister has always had a good taste. Xiao Wanru turned to Xiao Yenru with a smile and said. This time, she was very easy to talk to. Xiao Yenru clenched her hands hard and then relaxed. She reached out to pick up a hairpin from the plate and handed it to Xiao Wanru. Fifth sister, what do you think of this one? Of course, Big Sister will choose the best one. Big Sister has always had a good taste. Xiao Wanru glanced at the hairpin, took it casually, and put it in Chu Li's hand. Big Sister, if you have time, can you help me have a look at the layout of the Piaoyun courtyard? I don't dare to compare it with your courtyard. It just needs to be similar to it. I'll definitely come over when I have time. Xiao Yinru was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. However, she had pretended to be a sister's blind date with Xiao Wanru before. After Xiao Wanru made the matter clear, all the sisters present owed Xiao Wanru a favor. After all, strictly speaking, these rewards were given to Xiao Wanru. Moreover, these were not ordinary rewards. They were given by the Empress Dowager to Xiao Wanru for saving Chu Luchen. Since Xiao Wanru had received Xiao Wanru's favor here, Xiao Yinru had to promise Xiao Wanru. She didn't know the inside story of Xiao Wanru's courtyard. Although she was very angry, she reluctantly agreed. Xiao Wanru agreed and picked one. Then it would be much more normal for Old Madam to let the other sisters pick. Although everyone felt very embarrassed when they picked, they felt very aggrieved when they looked at Xiao Wanru, who was sitting there drinking tea with a smile. Even though Xiao Yenru, who wanted to pick a few more, was too embarrassed to do so at this time. She only picked 3 and then left. Xiao Wanru, as the younger sister, had picked a few before she made it clear that it was reasonable for the other sisters to pick more. After all, she, the younger sister, picked first. But now it was made clear that these were given to Xiao Wanru. In front of so many servants, Xiao Yinru really didn't have the face to pick more. This time, Xiao Yinru not only did not get any benefits, but also had to help Xiao Wanru check the layout of the Piaoyun courtyard. Fortunately, she still had to go to honored consort Shu's palace. She suppressed the anger in her heart and the smile on her face looked much more sincere. In the end, All the rewards were left by old madam in the name of putting them away for Xiao Wanru. Xiao Wanru didn't care about it. She thanked old madam for her kindness and then came out with a group of sisters. At the gate of the courtyard, Luo Zihuan and Luo Kaling said goodbye first. The two sisters seemed to be in a good mood. They specially said goodbye to Xiao Wanru and then left with their servants. Big sister, please go to the Piaoyun courtyard with me, okay? Xiao Wanru invited Xiao Yenru, who was about to leave. Xiao Wanru slightly raised her watery eyes with a faint but clear smile. Xiao Yenru hesitated and said, "Of course, she didn't want to go. Big sister, just for a while? Just have a look at me first. It won't take you much time. In the future, you can slowly help me change the bad layout." Xiao Wanru said eagerly. She signaled Chu Lu, who was standing aside, with her eyes. Chu Lu understood and left silently. She took a shortcut to the Piaoyun courtyard. Some decorations had been prepared long ago, so she just needed to rearrange them now. "Big sister, let's go and have a look together. I happen to be free now, so I'll go with you." Xiao Jie raised her eyebrows, looked at Xiao Wanru and said disdainfully, "I heard that Fifth Sister's courtyard is the best in the whole mansion, and it was chosen by Ru and Great Elder Princess for Fifth Sister. The layout inside must be exquisite. I'll go with you to have a look." The meaning of her words was that Ru and Great Elder Princess had forcibly occupied the courtyard, which Xiao Jie also secretly envied. But in the end, it fell into Xiao Wanru's hands. Why could Xiao Yenru, who had returned to her family later, occupy such a good courtyard? Xiao Jie, who had been in Duke Xing's mansion all the time, couldn't compare with her. Of course, Xiao Wanru understood the meaning of Xiao Jie's words, but now she pretended that she didn't understand. She raised her watery eyes and said very affectionately, "Since you have nothing to do at this time, let's go and have a look together. But second sister, you'd better not talk about Grandma. When Grandma gets angry, even I can't persuade her. What's more, Grandma belongs to the royal family, so she always has a bad temper." Her words seemed to be persuading Xiao Jie, but Xiao Jie was so angry that her face turned red, but she couldn't say anything to refute her. Ru and Great Elder Princess was so powerful that Xiao Jie couldn't move freely when she saw her from a distance. How dare she say that she was strong in front of Ru and Great Elder Princess? Just now, she just wanted to refute Xiao Wanru, but she didn't expect that Xiao Wanru not only retaliated, but also made her so angry that she didn't know what to say. She stomped her feet with hatred and was the first to go to the Piaoyun courtyard. She wanted to see what good things Ru and Great Elder Princess had bought for Xiao Wanru. If there was anything against the rules, she would immediately report it to Old Madam. Old Madam's disgust for Xiao Wanru was almost undisguised. Since Xiao Jie had passed, Xiao Yenru couldn't find an excuse to refuse. She could only force a smile, nod, and take a look at it casually. No matter what her mother arranged, she would only say, "Good." How could Xiao Wanru force her to say bad? After making up her mind, the three of them went to the Piaoyun courtyard one after another. When they entered the courtyard and saw the furniture in the room, Xiao Yenru's calm face was almost immediately broken, even though she had already made up her mind. She looked at the things in front of her in astonishment, her lips trembled, and she didn't say, "Good." She really couldn't say anything good about what she saw now. Chapter 653. Remember in 1 second, 800 $say, net. This is a wonderful free reading without a pop-up window. Xiao Yenru almost didn't know what to say about such a broken screen when she entered the door. One side of the screen was curled up, while the other side was worn out. The worst part was that a spot in the middle seemed to have been mended. It was very eye-catching. This screen was wide and big. It should have looked solemn and extraordinary, but at this moment, it seemed to be in a state of decay. When he turned to look again, he saw that every pendant on the chair had been sewn with a needle. However, the angle of the needle was not good. Just a few stitches were randomly sewn. It looked even more eye-catching than when they were not mended. Some of them might have deliberately found other materials to mend them because there was no similar cloth. It could be said that there were all kinds of mending styles. Xiao Jie Was dumbfounded as she looked at all this. She opened her mouth and found that she couldn't say anything mean. Everything in front of her was beyond all her imagination. Was this really a Mrs. Main room? It looked like a house full of junk, none of which was good. Looking around, there were either broken things or broken things. The people who lived in this house tried their best to make everything presentable, but they found that not only was it not presentable, but it also magnified the flaws. Just a glance at the house was enough to make people feel unbearably shabby. Fifth sister, did you repair them yourself? It took Xiao Yenru a long while to find her voice. Of course, it was mended by me and the maids together. It looks newer and feels more comfortable when mended by myself, Xiao Wenru said with a calm smile. With a delicate face, red lips, and soft eyes, she looked extremely beautiful. However, when Xiao Yenru saw such a face, she was so angry that she wanted to beat someone. She gritted her teeth, suppressed the anger in her heart, and said, "I'm afraid that it was done by the restless servants. After I go back and report it to my mother, she will definitely get some new ones for you." She meant that she blamed other servants for everything and it had nothing to do with Madame of Duke Xing. It doesn't matter whether they are new or old as long as they can be used. But I don't think they look good. If a guest comes here and sees everything in front of me, I'm afraid that she will say that I, the fifth Miss of Duke Xing's mansion, don't know how to adjust my room and make the whole room look messy. Xiao Yenru was good at pretending, so was Xiao Wenru. She had asked Chu Lu to come here before. He took out everything that needed to be set up. There was a set of teacups on the table that looked fine, but when he picked them up, there was a gap on the lid. In fact, the furniture sent by Madame of Duke Xing was not so bad. After she moved in, Xiao Wenru's mansion had been destroyed. After she moved in, Xiao Wenru's room. Xiao Wenru had brought a few maids with her and deliberately made it look like this. If she really finished the mourning period and was very busy during the spring festival and talked about these things when she was free, others would only say that she broke the ornaments carefully prepared for her by Madame of Duke Xing, but they would not say that Duke Xing's mansion deliberately sent some unreliable things to her when she moved in at the beginning. It was inconvenient for her to make it public when she was in mourning. She did the exact opposite of what was expected. Since she had returned to Duke Xing's mansion, she did not intend to swallow her anger. 3 years were enough for her to understand the past of Duke Xing's mansion and figure out how to deal with Duke Xing's mansion in the future. Her grandma was unkind and the second branch was hypocritical and vicious. She would not retreat. In the last life, she had no way to retreat and was forced to a dead end. In this life, if she retreated, she would definitely be slowly forced into a desperate situation step by step and stain the stone steps with blood like in the last life. In this life, with 3 years as a buffer, she could no longer retreat step by step when facing Duke Xing's mansion. What happened in the room was just the first step. I have to change some clothes first. I'll tell my mother now. Xiao Yenru couldn't stand it anymore. She only felt that Xiao Wenru's words were sharp and almost directed at her mother. She took a deep breath, suppressed the irritation in her heart, and turned to leave before Xiao Wenru said anything. Xiao Jie looked at Xiao Yenru, who had left, and then looked at Xiao Wenru. She finally showed a trace of sarcasm on her face and said, "You want such a shabby thing? Fifth sister, you are really desperate. Or are the things in your Qin's mansion so bad that such things are good?" The things in Qin's mansion are very good. Aren't all the things in Duke Xing's mansion like this? I thought all the masters in Duke Xing's mansion used the same things, Xiao Wenru said coldly. Xiao Jie was born to be mean to those who were inferior to her and always tried to step on those who were inferior to her. It was like this at any time. As for those who were superior to her, she blindly flattered and fawned on them. It was really difficult for others to have a good impression of her. Ignorant. After being ridiculed by Xiao Wenru, Xiao Jie's face turned red. After saying this angrily, she turned around and strode away. Xiao Wenru didn't say anything this time. She just looked at Xiao Jie's back with a smile and slightly raised the corners of her mouth. "Miss, will Madam change the furniture for us?" Chu Lu stood out from behind her with sweat all over her head. In order to race against time to decorate the room, she ran over and then quickly dealt with the furniture inside. Only now did she have time to catch her breath. Yes. Xiao Wanru smiled slightly and said with a cold look. The furnishings in the room were arranged by Madame of Duke Xing. It seemed that even Xiao Yanru didn't know it, so she followed her here. Madame of Duke Xing disliked her, and old Madame and Xiao Yanru wanted to trick her into the Imperial Palace. There seemed to be no relationship between them, so Xiao Yanru fell into the trap and followed her here. Since she saw it, she would help her. If Xiao Yanru didn't help her, she would be the one to lose face if she talked about it in front of honored consort Shu tomorrow. Xiao Yanru had always cherished her reputation and integrity. How could she allow her to talk about this matter? She would definitely try her best to change her reputation. She couldn't allow her to say that Duke Xing's mansion had treated her badly, nor could she allow her to talk about it everywhere. The best way was to make her shut up. She couldn't say such a shameful thing. The timing was not bad at all. Of course, if Xiao Yanru didn't react, Xiao Wanru wouldn't be afraid. Even if it had something to do with Xiao Yanru, she could talk about it with Xiao Yanru in the future. Will she change some good things for us? Chu Lu had a new question and asked uncertainly. Of course. Ask Qing to go to Grandma's place later and ask her to sort out the dowry list for my mother when she married into Duke Xing's mansion, Xiao Wanru said meaningfully. Miss, are you going to ask Madame of Duke Xing for the dowry of the Infanta? Chu Lu froze for a moment and said uneasily. It was not a good thing to ask the elders for the dowry. Besides, there was Master Hao. With Master Hao around, Miss was not qualified to ask Duke Xing's mansion for the Infanta's dowry. I'm not going to ask for it. Xiao Wanru shook her head. It was indeed unreasonable for her to ask for the dowry. Both she and Xiao Yuanhao were the children of Duke Xing's mansion. In particular, Xiao Yuanhao was still asking for the title of heir of Duke Xing. At this time, she couldn't ask for her mother's dowry. However, it didn't mean that she didn't ask for it. She had to know which of the dowry belonged to her and how, and couldn't let Duke Xing's mansion fool her. If there was a chance, she would definitely ask for her mother's dowry. However, she estimated that a large part of this dowry had already fallen into the hands of Madame of Duke Xing. But now she couldn't make a scene immediately, so she had to investigate slowly. Since Madame of Duke Xing got her mother's things, she would take some out. Since she was greedy, she had to be careful that she couldn't withdraw her hand after she stretched it out. She would definitely find something fishy on the dowry list first. Miss, are you going to the Imperial Palace to see honored consort Shu? Nanny Zheng appeared at the door. She seemed to be in a hurry and was a little out of breath. It is said that honored consort Shu gave something to Duke Xing's mansion and said that she wanted to see me. So she asked me to go to the Imperial Palace with a group of sisters to greet honored consort Shu. Xiao Wanru said casually. She turned to the chair in the middle and sat on the cushion. To be honest, the cushion looked a little shabby, and there was a big red patch sewn on it, but it was very comfortable on the whole. After sitting down, she looked at Nanny Zheng, who wanted to say something but stopped on second thought, and asked softly, Nanny Zheng, do you think something is wrong? Nanny Zheng came in with a frown, and her face was a little pale. After thinking about it, she finally said, Honored consort Shu doesn't like Prince Chen. Is there any relationship between honored consort Shu and Prince Chen? Xiao Wanru squinted at Nanny Zheng, and her watery eyes became deep. She didn't remember that there was any relationship between honored consort Shu and Chu Luchen. One was the legitimate son of the former emperor, and the other was the current emperor's concubine, who had no son. From this point of view, the two of them rarely met each other, so it was impossible for them to have any grudges. However, judging from Nanny Zheng's expression, it showed that there was a grudge between them. Xiao Wanru attached great importance to Nanny Zheng's words. Honored consort Shu doesn't like Prince Chen, and even, she hates Prince Chen. Although Nanny Zheng was a little hesitant, she finally said it. Just now, when she heard that Xiao Wanru was going to enter the Imperial Palace to meet honored consort Shu, she became nervous. Xiao Wanru saved Prince Chen, which would inevitably arouse honored consort Shu's disgust. At this time, honored consort Shu gave Xiao Wanru a reward and even wanted to see Xiao Wanru. It didn't seem that honored consort Shu had good intentions, so Nanny Zheng was very worried. Nanny, do you think that honored consort Shu will hurt me? After thinking for a while, Xiao Wanru understood Nanny Zhang's worry, and her eyes became a little more solemn. Honored Consort Shu came suddenly, and she had never heard that Honored Consort Shu had dealings with Duke Xing's mansion before. Could it be that Honored Consort Shu really came for her this time? It's possible, but not necessarily. Nanny Zheng nodded and then shook her head. She was really worried that Xiao Wanru would have an accident in the Imperial Palace. Don't worry, Nanny. I'll be fine. There was a trace of deepness in her watery eyes. Honored Consort Shu reached out at this time, which naturally meant something, but she shouldn't set her up as soon as she came. It seemed that she needed to be more careful tomorrow. At this juncture, this Empress Shu did not come with good intentions. Chapter 654. Coming out of the deserted courtyard, Dr. Chiu picked up the medicine box in his hand, carried it on his back, and strode out. He was Miss Wang's attending physician, who specialized in pulse diagnosis and acupuncture for Miss Wang. In the past, he always went back at this time. When he came out of the courtyard, he shook his head. Miss Wang's condition was really bad. After turning a corner and about to go to another path, a servant girl suddenly hurried over with a plate of fruit. Because she walked too fast, the two of them bumped into each other. Dr. Chiu was knocked back 2 steps and almost lost his balance, but the servant girl on the opposite side fell even harder. She directly fell to the ground, covered her face, and cried out, "Ouch!" Maybe she had hit her face or lips when she fell on her stomach just now. "Are you all right?" It was not convenient for Dr. Chiu to leave directly, so he came over and asked, "Why don't you look at the road when you walk?" "Ouch, my face is swollen." The servant girl supported herself with one hand and slowly sat on the ground. Even though only half of her face was exposed, she still looked at Dr. Chiu unkindly. Dr. Chiu was a doctor and had a better temper than ordinary people. Seeing that the servant girl had fallen hard, he squatted down and stretched out his hand to feel her pulse. "Let me see if you are hurt." Perhaps the servant girl was also afraid of the fall. Seeing him reach out to feel her pulse, she didn't dare to talk anymore and stretched out her hand to let him feel it carefully. After a while, Dr. Chiu opened his eyes and said, "Miss, don't worry. It's not a big deal." "Why is it not a big deal?" "My face is swollen." The servant girl was so angry that she almost cried and glared at Dr. Chiu. Seeing her like this, Dr. Chiu also felt that he was in the wrong. After all, she was a young girl, so he couldn't argue with her. He put down his medicine box, opened it, took out a bottle of ointment from it, and handed it to the servant girl. "This is for reducing swelling. Apply it on your face for 3 days and it will be almost healed." Just now, the servant girl's pulse was normal and there was nothing wrong with her. Although she covered her face with her hands, there was no blood, so her skin should not be broken, and her voice was still clear. In summary, it seemed that her face was just swollen, which was not a big deal. "Is it really useful?" The servant girl seemed very confused and looked at Dr. Chiu in disbelief. "Of course it's useful. You can use it when you go back." Dr. Chiu closed the lid of the medicine box, stood up, and said, "If it doesn't work, where can I find you?" The maid grabbed Dr. Chiu's robe with her hand, as if she wouldn't let him go until he gave her a clear explanation. Dr. Chiu had no choice but to say, "I'll stay in your mansion to treat Miss Wang's illness. If you have any problems, you can come to me directly. I'll definitely treat your injury." "Really?" The servant girl covered half of her face, raised her head, and looked at Dr. Chiu in disbelief. "Really?" Doctor said. "Doctor up. Can't I Chiu Wang." As a doctor, Dr. Chiu also had a temper, especially when someone suspected him. He reached out to pull his robe, but it was pulled tightly, so he couldn't pull it out even if he wanted to. "No, if you don't leave some evidence, I won't be able to explain myself." The servant girl held his robe tightly, as if Dr. Chiu would not leave without some evidence. Dr. Chiu pulled a few times and found that he really couldn't pull it off. The servant girl looked thin and small, but she was very strong. Okay, I'll see what I have and leave some evidence for you," Dr. Chiu said helplessly. It was really not good to see such a scene. At that time, people would not necessarily blame the little servant girl for not being sensible. Instead, they would say that it was really impolite of him to argue with a little servant girl at such an old age. He reached out to feel in his arms, but he didn't find anything for a while. I saw a beautiful medicine bottle in your medicine box just now. Let's take that one. The servant girl gave him an idea. Let me see which one it is. Dr. Chiu had no choice but to open the medicine box again. As expected, he saw an empty bottle on the top. He took it out casually, handed it to the servant girl, and said, "Okay, take it first. This medicine bottle is mine. I just used it and there is a label on it. Now you can let go of it." But the servant girl took the medicine bottle. This time, she was straightforward and loosened her grip on the robe. Seeing that the servant girl finally let go, Dr. Chiu covered his medicine box, carried it on his back, and turned to leave. He didn't want to be entangled with the little servant girl here. He had been in Duke Xing's mansion for almost 3 years. There were many rules in aristocratic families. Even if she was a little servant girl, she might cause some trouble at that time. When it was over, he could leave and never come to the capital city again. Seeing Dr. Chiu leave as if he couldn't wait to avoid her, Yujia stood up with her hands on her waist, touched her unscathed face, and turned back to the Piaoyun courtyard. She deliberately came to bump into Dr. Chiu. When the medicine box was open just now, she saw clearly that there was a set of acupuncture needles in it, but this set of needles seemed to be different from those she had seen in Xiao Wanru's hands. Every doctor's acupuncture needles were not necessarily the same, but even if there were some differences, it could be seen that it was indeed a set of acupuncture needles. Dr. Chiu was also very familiar with the way of feeling the pulse just now, and he could tell that she was fine. It could be seen that this Dr. Chiu was a real doctor instead of a fake one. The ointment he gave her was not bad. Yujia was also proficient in medical skills. In the past, she often worked as a medicine boy for Mingqiu Nun and pounded medicine, so she was also proficient in pharmacology. She could smell what was used in the ointment, and it turned out that the ointment was made of good materials. If her face was really swollen because of the fall, she could indeed be fine after applying it for 3 days. As for the empty medicine bottle that she had extorted from his medicine box just now, Yujia put it to her nose and sniffed it. This time, she couldn't tell what it was. She was very surprised that she couldn't tell what it was, so she put it to her nose and sniffed it again. She still couldn't tell what it was. She had no choice but to put away the medicine bottle, pick up the fruit from the ground, put it on the plate, and then took it back to the Piaoyun courtyard. In the Piaoyun courtyard, Chu Lu was choosing clothes for Xiao Wanru to enter the palace. They couldn't be too colorful, because it was not suitable for her to wear them in her current situation. However, if she was too plain, it would be disrespectful to honored consort Shu. In fact, Xiao Wanru didn't have many clothes with her, let alone in Duke Xing's mansion. Ri and Great Elder Princess would make a few suitable clothes for Xiao Wanru, but Duke Xing's mansion had never made such clothes. At this time, there were only a few extremely simple clothes, and there were no suitable clothes for her to wear. Looking at the few simple white clothes on the bed, Chu Lu was also very worried. Now she had no clothes to wear at all. What should she do? "Miss, let me go to Great Elder Princess's mansion. There should be a few clothes prepared for you in Great Elder Princess's mansion," Chu Lu suggested. Even the cleverest housewife couldn't cook a meal without rice. Old Madam only asked Miss to enter the palace and urged her in such a hurry, but she didn't prepare clothes for Miss at all. It was really too much. This grandmother was not only careless, but also had evil intentions. In the past, old Madam Chin was not Miss's biological grandmother, but she still doted on Mississippi. This was the real grandmother of Miss, but she was like this. Not only did she take the gift from Empress Dowager from Miss, but she also ignored everything about Mississippi. She was even colder than a passerby. "I'll take that one." Xiao Wanru was very leisurely. Anyway, she didn't have any intention of getting close to this old madam. She tilted her head, pointed to a set of clothes, and said, "There was nothing special about this set of clothes, but fortunately, it was new and made of good material at first glance. Miss, this set of clothes is really plain. It's not very good." Chu Lu shook the clothes in her hands with a bitter face and said, "Everyone knows that I'm cultivating in seclusion, but honored consort Shu doesn't seem to know it and insists on seeing me. Since she insists on seeing me, why should I compromise myself to seek perfection?" Xiao Wanru said with an unclear look. "If someone hated you, they could find fault with you no matter what you wore. Since honored consort Shu came with evil intentions, she would definitely not be kind to you tomorrow. Then no matter what you wore, she would be criticized. It was better to wear her own color. At least she could stand in reason. After all, she was not honored consort Shu, who she was going to see. Miss, this is not very good." Chu Lu still felt that it was not appropriate. It was the Imperial Palace, not an ordinary mansion. "So what? If you really think it's too plain, you can use that purple bamboo hairpin tomorrow. After all, it is a purple one with a very distinctive color." Xiao Wanru casually flipped through the medical book in her hand, lowered her head and said, "This." Chu Lu stammered and didn't know what to say. Although the color was a little distinctive, to be honest, was this kind of hairpin, which was almost as ordinary as the bamboo on the side of the road, really good? It was even worse than a silver hairpin. "Okay, it's settled. Choose a pair of pearl earrings. It doesn't need to be too distinctive. Find a sachet, light blue or light yellow. At least change the color in other places, which can be regarded as a sign of respect for honored consort Shu. I'll choose this set of clothes." Xiao Wanru made the final decision. "Yes, miss." Chu Lu said helplessly and sighed. "Miss, smell what kind of medicine this is." "I can't smell it." Yujia happened to come in at this moment. After lifting the curtain and coming in, she handed the empty medicine bottle in her hand to Xiao Wanru and reported, "Miss, this Dr. Chiu is definitely a real doctor and seems to be very good at medical skills. This Dr. Chiu is definitely a real doctor, and he seems to be very good at medicine. I don't know if he knows that he is guilty of doing this." Wang Yishu's illness had not been well, which must have something to do with Dr. Chiu. As a doctor, he was so vicious. Yujia was very angry. As a medicine boy of Mingqiu Nun, this was the most contemptible thing for her. As a doctor, he didn't save people, but he dared to collude with others to harm people. It was really unforgivable. Xiao Wanru put down the book, took the bottle and smelled it. For a moment, she couldn't smell anything, so she put it by her nose and sniffed hard. She really couldn't smell anything, but she felt inexplicably familiar with it. Familiar? A trace of gloominess flashed across her watery eyes. It was really familiar. Had she smelled it in Jiangzhou, or she smelled it again and thought carefully. When and where had she smelled this kind of medicine? In this life, she had smelled a lot of commonly used medicines, but this medicine was obviously not commonly used. Then what was it? Not commonly used? Was it in the last life? Something suddenly flashed across her mind like a flash of lightning. She was so shocked that she immediately widened her watery eyes and her hands trembled slightly. She seemed to remember, please remember the original domain name of this book. Jiutian Shenhuang Mobile Version. Chapter 655. Miss Qi has sent a letter to the first young master. This time, she did it much more secretly than last time. Qing came back a little late. Don't worry about her. Xiao Wanru blinked her eyes and had a conclusion in her heart. After being smashed by the people sent by Madame of Duke Xing, Qi Rongji would restrain herself a little, but it didn't mean that Qi Rongji would stop so easily, especially tomorrow was a day when everyone was not in the mansion. All the misses were going to the Imperial Palace, and Madame of Duke Xing was busy preparing for her eldest daughter to enter the Imperial Palace. Qi Rongji's defense was relatively simple. If she got help, it would not be difficult for her to escape. She had deliberately sent the news that the misses would enter the Imperial Palace tomorrow to Qi Rongji. Qi Rongji's letter also showed that she was going to take action. Prepare a carriage outside the back door. If Qi Rongji escapes, she will definitely go to the back door. It should be when we enter the Imperial Palace. At that time, everyone will be in a mess. The 5 misses will enter the Imperial Palace together, and the servant girls and old maids will also be in a mess, and they will all be at the front door. Xiao Wenru turned the handkerchief in her hand and said with a leisurely smile. Qi Rongji could bear it until now, but she probably couldn't bear it anymore. The marriage in the past made people feel that Madame of Duke Xing was kind, and she also supported the daughter of a small aristocratic family. She was a generous elder. But what about now? A chill flashed in her eyes. Miss, when I came back just now, I saw first Mrs. Servant Moyen go to the back door. Qing, suddenly said. Xiao Yinru's two most capable principal maids were Shuqi and Moyen, but it was usually Shuqi who followed Xiao Yenru in the past, and Moyen was rarely seen. It was similar to when she was on the mountain. Moyen was rarely seen, so Qing, paid more attention to her when she saw her sneak to the back door alone. Xiao Wenru lowered her head, picked up the tea silently, and took a sip. Let's wait and see tomorrow. It seemed that not only honored consort Shu, but Xiao Yinru would also take action tomorrow. Your Highness, a letter from the first Miss Xiao. Xiao Qizi respectfully presented the letter in his hand. Chu Luiyue looked up at the letter in Xiao Qizi's hand and continued to finish writing. After finishing writing, he cleaned his hands, carefully wiped the water stains on his hands with a handkerchief, and then took the letter from Xiao Qizi's hand. He took out the letter and read its contents, and his face darkened. It was very quiet in the study, and only Chu Luiyue frowned slightly. After reading it, he stuffed the letter into the envelope and handed it to Xiao Qizi. Xiao Qizi walked to the bottom of the first bookshelf on the left, took out a box from it, and put the letters in it. There was a thick stack of letters, which were all written by Miss Xiao to his master. Sitting in front of the desk, Chu Luiyue picked up the tea beside him and took a sip. There was no joy on his face. Xiao Qizi didn't dare to speak. He just stood to the side with his hands and shoulders down, not daring to move. After a long while, Chu Luiyue said, "Does Prince Zhou still go to the palace to see the Empress at the same time every day?" "Yes, it's still at the same time. Basically, he goes to see the Empress at the same time." Xiao Qizi thought for a moment and said with certainty, "Tomorrow, you will also go to the palace at the same time." Chu Luiyue said, "But honored consort Shu asked you to go earlier tomorrow." Xiao Qizi cautiously reminded him. "What's the difference between going earlier and later? The fifth Miss of Duke Xing's mansion is not the daughter of an ordinary family. If she is the younger one, then Great Elder Princess will not spare me. If this chapter is not finished, please turn the page." Chu Luiyue raised the corner of his mouth and said lightly. It was not that he didn't want the fifth Miss of Duke Xing's mansion to be his consort, but with her identity, how could she really be a consort? If she really had something to do with them, and Great Elder Princess and the Empress Dowager would definitely force her to marry them. Although and Great Elder Princess could have a say in front of the Empress Dowager, it was still not worth it compared with the real help of Duke Xing's mansion. Moreover, Xiao Yinru was also very affectionate to him, and her appearance was so outstanding that the fifth Miss of Duke Xing's mansion could not compare with her. He really didn't want to cooperate with honored consort Shu's idea. But he couldn't refuse her openly. Honored consort Shu had no children and was close to his mother. If he got closer to her, he could also make her work for him. He couldn't refuse her directly, so he let Chu Liuzhou come to make trouble. At that time, if he was careful, he would not be involved in this matter. If Chu Liuzhou had something to do with the fifth Miss of Duke Xing's mansion, how to deal with this matter had nothing to do with him. He was also very happy to see the fight between the Empress Dowager and the Empress. But in this way, honored consort Shu will be unhappy. Xiao Qizi knew that Chu Luiyue attached great importance to honored consort Shu and said, "After this matter is over, it will be the consort selection. I will naturally choose a girl from honored consort Shu's family." Chu Luiyue leaned back, and he was not very embarrassed about this. Even if Chu Liuzhou really had something to do with the Miss of Duke Xing's mansion, it would be an accident and had nothing to do with him. Choosing a girl from honored consort Shu's family was also something he had originally thought about. "Prince, Lord Wen is here," a little eunuch outside reported in a shrill voice. "Invite him in." Chu Luiyue showed a kind smile on his face. He had sent someone to invite Wen Shiqi before. Xiao Qizi hurriedly stepped forward and lifted the curtain. Wen Shiqi, dressed in a cyan brocade robe, stood tall in the yard. Seeing the curtain lifted, he walked in. After entering the door, he bowed to Chu Luiwei first. Chu Luiwei turned out from behind the desk with a smile, sat down at the reception seat on the right side of the study, and waved to Wen Shiqi. Yuanqing, come and sit here. Prince, what can I do for you? Wen Shiqi turned around and sat down opposite him, slightly frowning, and asked calmly. It's nothing important. It's just that I've been troubled by the previous matter. Recently, I happened to get an ancient book, so I want to invite you to have a look to see if it's authentic. Xiao Qizi took a book from the bookshelf on the side and handed it over respectfully. Wen Shiqi took it and flipped through it. As expected, it was an ancient book. It was a little broken, and it happened to be the handwriting of the scholar of the previous dynasty whom he was looking for. I heard that you are looking for his authentic work. If this book is authentic, I'll give it to you for you to have a look. Chu Luiwei said with a smile, picked up the teacup at hand, took a sip, and said slowly. Thank you, Prince. Wen Shiqi said with a faint look in his eyes. He casually flipped through the book in his hand and put it aside as if he was not interested in it. Yuanqing, do you not like it? Chu Luiwei glanced at the ancient book he found and asked in surprise. Of course, this ancient book was authentic. He had specially thought of many ways to get it. Originally, he wanted to give it to Wen Shiqi, but he didn't expect that Wen Shiqi didn't care about it. Of course I like it, but I don't deserve your kindness. Wen Shiqi lowered his head slightly and looked a little alienated. Since you like it, why do you need to be so polite? There's no need to be so polite between us. Chu Luiwei said with a smile. If this chapter was not over, please turn the page. His face became a little softer. Of course, he wanted to win over Wen Shiqi. Compared with the other two sons of the Prime Minister, Wen Shiqi was much more worthy of winning over. Fortunately, you found a way to help the first Miss Xiao before. When talking about this, Chu Luiwei's eyes were full of gratitude. Wen Shiqi fell silent for a while and said after a long while, It's not of great help. I'm sorry that you don't like me. Although Chu Luiwei mentioned Xiao Yanru, Wen Shiqi knew that he said this to let Wen Shiqi understand Xiao Yanru's identity and his identity. If he offended them, he would offend them. If he helped them, he would owe them a favor. Thinking of what he had found in Jingxin Monastery, a trace of sarcasm flashed across Wen Shiqi's eyes. Xiao Yanru was very scheming, which he had known since he was a child. He didn't expect that she had married Prince Yu now. Since Prince Yu told him so clearly, it seemed that she would definitely be Prince Yu's wife. Wen Shiqi frowned tightly. He didn't like the current situation. What do you mean by that? No one wants to do this. I didn't expect that it would be so serious and even make my father angry. Although it was settled later and the fifth Miss Xiao was not punished as a demon, at least it can dilute the matter of the first Miss Xiao. Speaking of it, it's all thanks to you. I'm here to thank you for her. Chu Luiwei picked up the teacup at hand and said to Wen Shiqi with a smile. Wen Shiqi's eyes darkened. He didn't like to mention this matter. In the past, he had always been indifferent to everything. He didn't even care so much about this official position. However, it was this idea that he had been thinking about and inexplicably uncomfortable. He even felt very uncomfortable, as if he had done something against his will. However, when she thought about it carefully, she found that it was nothing. Although Xiao Wanru had been in contact with her and reminded her of some things, she obviously knew these things inadvertently, or Qin Huaiyong let her know them through her mouth in order to establish a relationship with her mansion. At that time, Qin Huaiyong also intended to unite his mansion by marriage. Thinking of this, he didn't care so much about Xiao Wanru's benefits to him. He knew this was the truth, but he always remembered in his heart that if his plan had succeeded, Xiao Wanru would have ended up extremely miserable. Every time he thought of this, he would always have a dream at midnight. In the dream, Xiao Wanru knelt in the morning hall with a miserable face and looked haggard, which made him feel sorry for her. He knew that this dream was fake, but every time he woke up, he felt sorry for her. He covered his chest and sat on the bed for a long time without falling asleep. He even wondered if he had forgotten something important. What if Xiao Wanru really had something to do with him? This feeling was very uncomfortable, so uncomfortable that he almost didn't want to recall that he had helped Chu Liyue plot against Xiao Wanru that day. Fortunately, this matter was later disturbed by someone and brought to the emperor. Your Highness, let bygones be bygones. Don't mention it. When Shichi picked up the teacup at hand and drank it up to hide the displeasure in his eyes. Then he put down the teacup in his hand heavily. Yunqing, in fact, I still have something to trouble you this time. Seeing when Shichi put down the teacup in his hand, Chu Liyue's smile became more and more amiable. He had always been cold, so such a smile could hardly be seen in front of others. If others saw it, they would definitely be flattered. When Shichi was shocked now, but it was not because of Chu Liyue's favor. There were silent waves rolling in his eyes, but he didn't show it on his face. He raised his eyes and said, Your Highness, please tell me. End of this chapter. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.